Good evening and welcome to Deep Space Wine. This is a DS9 rewatch featuring myself, Tim, a grizzled old fan who remembers when DS9 was first syndicated in the UK in the 90s, and my trusty co-pilot, Kat, who
Oh,
is coming to DS9 new for the first time. So we are going to plunder their brand new experiences of DS9 to refresh ourselves and live vicariously through their new experiences.
oh God, no.
Do not sell yourself short. As always, Kat and I interchange who summarizes the episode. So I will just quickly say that this is season 1, episode 11 or 12. We're still not sure where we are in the count, depending on whether or not you count Emissary as a two-parter. But it is an episode entitled Vortex. And as always, I will hand over to Kat now, who will give us a quick summary.
Absolutely. In terms of content warnings for this week, I think we've got spaceships firing plasma blasts at each other. Is about as violent as it gets. There's mention of murder. Otherwise, I think that's about. No, someone is killed with a phaser. But no, I don't think there's anything that's outside of the realm of fantasy, sci-fi violence.
Agree.
So the plot summary for this one is a little on the long side, so please forgive me for this, and thank you Wikipedia for providing it to us. During a business transaction between unscrupulous bar operator Quark and a pair of Mirror-Dawn twins, a Rakaran visitor from the Gamma Quadrant, whose name is Croden, attempts to steal a valuable item. Odo intercedes, but not before one of the Mirror-Dawn twins is killed. Odo takes Croden into custody, where the remaining twin, Arkel, vows vengeance. Croden makes several comments to Odo regarding changelings. This piques Odo's interest as he has never encountered another shapeshifter. Croden claims that there were once shapeshifters on his homeworld who were persecuted and driven off the planet. Croden claims to know a place where they still exist and tries to tempt Odo by offering to bring him to this colony. Odo is dubious of Croden's stories until Croden shows him a necklace containing a stone that changes shape. Dr. Bashir examines it and tells Odo that, given its composition, it could be distantly related to Odo. Croden's homeworld, Rakar, demands his return, and Commander Sisko sends Odo to return him. Arkel intimidates Quark into revealing that Odo has taken Croden to the Gamma Quadrant, and he pursues them to exact vengeance on Croden. In the runabout vessel, Croden tells Odo that he was a political prisoner on his home planet, and most of his family were killed by the government. When Arkel appears in pursuit, Odo is forced to release Croden to assist invading Arkel's ship, so he unfastens Croden's handcuffs and lets him guide the ship for a while. Croden navigates the Shamra Vortex, an asteroid field filled with unstable pockets of gas called Tomer, and lands on a planet which he claims contains the Changeling colony. On the surface, Croden's eagerness reignites Odo's doubt. Odo demands the truth of Croden's stories. Croden reveals that he's never actually met a changeling. The shape-shifting stone he showed Odo was bought at a marketplace. Croden uses the stone to open a chamber he had left on the planet's surface, which contains his daughter, who he had put into stasis. Arkel fires on the planet, prompting the three to return to their runabout. A falling rock incapacitates Odo, and Croden carries him back to the runabout. In the vortex, Odo tricks Arkel into firing on a pocket of Tomer, destroying the pursuing ship. Ultimately, Croden decides to answer for his crime on his homeworld and asks Odo to take care of his daughter, but Odo, indebted to Croden, finds a Vulcan ship that agrees to take Croden and his daughter back to Vulcan. Croden gives Odo his necklace containing the Changeling Stone as a sign of thanks. That's a very generous summary, frankly.
It
There's
was
some parts of that I would take issue with.
yes, I would say some of it's not accurate, and overall it was very long compared to I think the summary I gave last time was about 10 lines.
I
You
think the
know.
length of it was kind of unavoidable because there is so much
Hmm.
action-based kerfuffle in this episode, with
Good word.
various people being shot at, blaming one another, traveling from one place to another. It's a very plot-heavy episode, and I think that's a weakness of it. But shall we dive into scene by scene, and I'll complain about the things I disliked as we come to them.
That sounds spectacular. So, for new viewers to the show, we like to break it down scene by scene, work our way through, and then at the end, sum it up, usually a little bit wine sodden. So, anticipate some passionate responses. But yes, do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to get us started in the bar?
Yeah, I'm very happy to kick us off. We open on Quark's bar,
Mm.
Odo walks in, and he orders the usual, which is nothing, which is quite charming. he mentions that a Miradon ship has arrived,
Mm.
and Quark says that their reputation as raiders, which is what Odo refers to them as, is probably like the Ferengi's reputation, a bit exaggerated. But Quark still considers them a quarrelsome people and
Mm.
has chosen to forgo the usual amenities, such as inviting them to the bar to discuss business over a free drink. So immediately we've got a scene with Odo assuming the worst of Quark and Quark desperately denying it,
Mhm, mhm.
which will be proven fake later in the episode.
It's
Um,
a very. I think even at this early stage in the series, that feels very familiar. That is the Odo and Quark interplay, which I think even
it's
you now would find very familiar.
Yeah, I think maybe it's unkind of me to find it a bit hackneyed that we start in the bar where Odo is sitting and is suspicious of a new visitor who is sitting in the bar. But I'm certain we've had that at least once before.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
100%.
it is a very convenient way of setting things up. It's a space that everyone eventually goes to, and Quark is always involved in any shenanigans going on. But yeah, it's a very obvious place to start an episode.
I wonder
Um,
if this is how DS9 gets around earlier shows such as the original series in TNG, where it was always hailing frequencies. Ah, a strange new ship has entered orbit. That I think there are a narrow amount of paths down which a Star Trek episode can introduce new things. But
This
I
is
would.
true. Yeah, I think you're right. In TNG, there's either someone's hailing us or the ambassador from such and such planet is visiting, and Picard is already on his way to the transport bay. Yeah, whereas we've got everyone, all roads lead to Quarks.
All roads lead to Quarks, which will no doubt make him very happy, and he just wants to know how he can put a toll on those roads. But more of Quark's thievery later. I, I do feel like it is a slightly lazy bit of shorthand to get the episode going, which I think all of Star Trek is guilty of. All of Star Trek, I would say, they just love that because they want to get you quickly to the characters who are the heart of the story. Um,
This is true. I think though this episode takes more shortcuts, uses more of these cheesy bits of what are quickly becoming they're not becoming hackneyed in most episodes because usually they're so full of character. There's
mm,
normally so much warmth and so much interest shoved in, but I feel that
mm.
this episode it lacks it to an extent.
Oh, interesting.
um,
Okay. What I did like in this scene was uh, they talking about the other newcomer, the Croden, who was I think brought to the station by Klingon explorers from the Gamma Quadrant.
yes, and
Um,
there's mention made that he was greeted by Cisco in a full
yes.
diplomatic, because he's a new
Mm,
species from the Gamma Quadrant,
exactly.
and apparently he didn't like that. He was a little scared of them.
Overwhelmed, I think, and I actually do sympathise a bit with what Quark says here, where the Federation could learn a few things from the Ferengi about hospitality, and I think he actually has a good point because
In the episode with the Waddy, actually,
that's
yeah.
exactly what I was thinking with the ridiculous dress uniforms and that formal, on behalf of the United Federation of Planets, welcome, and they were just like yes, 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 and the games. Where are the games? So I can get it. I can actually get what Quark means here. I think he makes a good
At the
point.
same time, I think Odo says something along the lines of, and if he was so afraid of them, what did he have to be scared of?
Again, it's very
Immediately,
broad.
Odo is suspicious, Quark is
Yes,
welcoming.
yeah, it's very broad strokes on both these characters, isn't it?
Yes. We then get to the two Miradorns walk
Mm,
in, and there's quite a few moments of silence. They walk in, and they just walk towards the camera and stand there in silence for a few moments,
yep.
looking around before they nod towards Quark and then head to their table. And Odo, of course, clocks the nod and suggests that they are after something.
Hmm.
And Quark says, no, they must just want to use a holosuite. Odo thinks the whole galaxy is plotting around him, that his paranoia explains why he's never seen another shapeshifter. They're always hiding.
And interesting because that stabs at well, sure, a being that can look like any other being is by definition hiding.
True.
And I will caution chat now. A reminder: Cat has not seen DS9. Do not go in with any. Well, obviously it's because X is to come, and we are going to get to X in due course. So please, no spoilers
There's an
in
X
chat.
coming up. God damn it, I
I've
was waiting
given
for
it all
that.
away. I've given it all away.
But yes, I haven't got a clue who anyone is or what's happening at any time, so don't tell me.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. But also, I think that's also a bit of a clunky way of saying this is going to be an Odo episode. You know,
It Yeah, I've written in my notes that I
Hmm.
didn't like this scene at all. It feels everything in it feels like it's setting up the plot.
Yeah.
Even Quark mentioning that Odo is the only one of the shapeshifters in this quadrant,
Which
alone in the world.
we've
Like,
already
you see him
know.
every single day.
Mm,
How is that coming up organically in conversation between you? But there could be so many opportunities for Odo to talk to someone about his feelings of
mhm,
loneliness,
mhm,
or to, to bump up against problems with shapeshifting that
mhm.
only another shapeshifter could help him resolve. Maybe he can't do the texture of Cardassian skin or something. But no, it's just kind of shoved in at the beginning. You're the
Mhm.
only one of you that there is.
It's
I've
dropped
got
like
things
an
to do now. Yeah.
anvil, isn't it? It is so heavy-handed. So, yes, disappointing. But you get the feeling that the writers were scrambling as quickly as possible to get to the meat of the story. But
Yeah.
a good setup, can make the difference. And then, unfortunately, in this case, really think they did fumble that. So,
Yeah, I think I just
yes.
need to spend a little bit more time in the bar, having a bit more of an organic conversation before the
Hmm.
Miradorns wander in.
No,
But
I
they
agree.
lacked time, network television being what it is. But in a kind of nice touch, we do go to Ron bringing drinks to the two Miradorns and Quark, who are in one of the holosuites, exactly as Quark had said they would be. But they are doing business negotiations, criminal business negotiations, just as
Yes.
Odo suggested they would be. They were both right.
Yes. There is suspicion that this bauble, which looks like a very nice space Fabergé egg, which I put in my notes,
Yes, it's like a bright pink Fabergé egg. They never actually say what it
they
is.
never say what it is, and I love that. They don't need to. It's just a sparkly bauble, I think Quark calls it as well,
Yeah,
which is an excellent word as well. And the Mirador want 1,000 gold press platinum for it, which is a lot. Which
Steve.
is a lot of money. We're still kind of establishing rough understandings of how much currency is worth, but 1,000 bars is a hell of a lot.
Oh, as the indoor cat points out, the Fabergé egg is an objet
Objet
d'art.
d'art. Thank you, the indoor cat. Well described. It is indeed. Still, 1,000 bars. That's a lot.
I'm
Um,
pretty sure they started the bidding on the incredibly expensive thing that was blowing up the ship in the Q episode. They
mm,
started that about 500 bars of platinum.
something like
So
that. Yeah, yeah.
1,000 is, yeah, pretty hefty.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, I don't know if you noticed, Ron brought in the drinks, obviously. How many glasses were on the tray?
There were 4 people in the room. You've got Ron, Quark, and the 2 Miradorn.
Yep. Yes.
There are 5
There are
glasses.
5 glasses. Honestly, we kind of get away from that meme, but I love it. I do have some. Do I have some behind the scenes? Oh, I don't. I think there
Oh,
was an intention of the producers to hover on the tray and show you the extra glass in a kind of
I
tantalizing to
think
see who's
on the
watching.
way in, the camera was kind of on the tray coming in before
Precisely.
panning to Ron and the others.
Precisely. So that was very intentional, I think, as well. So a nice little bit of foreshadowing because, yes, Quark is very worried that this objet d'art is hot because a ship was raided not less than 2 light years away,
Mhm.
and an object matching that description was taken. And yeah,
Yeah, and the Miradon is not happy about this. He grabs Quark threateningly and says he's got to find another buyer. And Quark's like, well, it's a hot item. That could take a long time. And then Cronin walks in holding a Ferengi phaser,
mm,
seeming very nervous. Admittedly, he doesn't seem to want to be holding it. He asks them to stay where they are, says no one's going to get hurt. He just wants, I can't even remember what he refers to it. I think he just wants the pink egg thing.
yeah. Let's just call
I
it
think he
that.
just points at it. He's just like, give me that.
That I think he does just say that.
Yeah, they didn't come up with a name for this thing. So one of the Miradons hits Cronin with the table, which had all of the glasses on it. The
Mm,
glasses smash, and suddenly all the little glass pieces
I
turn
like
into
that.
Odo, and he just whoops out of the floor.
I did like that. I thought that
Yeah,
was
that's great fun.
again another opportunity to show Odo shapeshifting, which is great and difficult because the technology was only just emerging. It was very expensive to do.
Doing it from a clear object in multiple parts, as they do
Hmm.
in this scene, it must have. Yeah, I'm wondering whether that's where all the time went.
Again, looking at my behind the scenes, I have Mark Altman's captain's logs with all the behind the scenes information on TNG and DS9. They do say that Vortex was one of the most expensive episodes of season 1 to produce. So
Oh
I
my god,
think.
what a waste!
Oh, oh, good lord! A cold torpedo blow there from Captain Cat. Good lord, but
But yeah,
Yes.
but it's got only one Odo transformation in the episode, and this is it. And it does look good. It works well. It's unexpected unless you clocked the number of glasses on that tray. And it's well placed. There's suddenly a violence happening. There's a man there with a phaser, and Odo is there to sort him out.
Absolutely, but not before he zaps one of the Miradorn.
Yeah.
Sadly. I did like Quoden's line when the Miradorn say, "You're making a mistake," and he goes, "It wouldn't be the first, probably won't be the last." I did like that Quoden had a little bit of a kind of fatalistic, jokey manner about him, and I thought that was
I think throughout this
good
episode, I
intro
think
line.
because of the way that the character is written, because of the role that he plays, because we're not meant to know at any given moment what we can trust of what he says.
100%.
The actor has a constant ironic tone to his voice,
Yes,
which in
very
some
much.
scenes works really well, and in some scenes I felt he could have dialed back a bit. But yeah, it does work well. It's like, oh, not the first mistake, and probably not the last. Hand over the Fabergé egg.
Or whatever the hell it is.
No one knows what that thing's for.
Odo Studley is there, wrestles Quoden down. He's already shot one of the Miradorn, and the other Miradorn comes at him, ready to kill him. And Odo just gives him like a judo chop across the chest, and the Miradorn is out. Even though he's like twice Odo's size, he's out, he's down. So don't mess with Odo.
Good job, Odo. And then there's a quick shot of a Quark telling off Rom for bringing in a tray with the wrong number of glasses without realising.
5 glasses for 4 people.
I think it was 2 episodes ago that Quark was thinking that Odo had been the bottle of wine on a table while he was talking with someone. So although Quark has complained of Odo's paranoia, Quark is very understandably always on his guard against any random object suddenly appearing in a room in case they're the security
Exactly.
officer.
I wouldn't even say Quark was paranoid. I think he's reasonably concerned.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But yes, I did find this scene fun for the Odo transformation with Quark telling Rom off. But the whole plot is just an excuse to set up the Odo plot.
Yeah. Because we never hear
we've got-
about the egg again, and it's really just a way to make, like,
It's just a MacGuffin to bring together the 2 Miradorn and Quoden, none of whom we know anything much about yet, except that they've come from the Gamma Quadrant.
In fact, what even is the benefit to Quoden of having the Fabergé? Is that ever explored in the episode?
It later transpires that he was being paid by Quark to disrupt the meeting.
Right.
I don't think it's ever explained where they were going to go from there.
Okay.
For whatever reason, Quark wanted Quoden to obtain the item away from the Miradorn, but it's not explained whether Quark intended to sell it on after that, whether he knew that it was hot and just wanted to squirrel it away somewhere, whether he actually intended to hand it. We just don't know. I think it's a dropped thread in an episode that's quite full of. It's quite plot heavy. It moves quite quickly.
I think you're absolutely right. So let's do that as well. Let's drop this now.
Okay, the next scene, the remaining Miradorn, his name is Arkel, is kneeling before Sisko. He's under arrest. He asks if Sisko's met any twinned Miradorn, and Sisko hasn't. And the Miradorn says, "In my species, we are not just twin brothers. Together, we are a single self, 2 halves of one being. I am incomplete now," which I think it's a nice consideration. It gives the Miradorn a thing that's different in them than in other species. It's something that Earth species do not have, that sense of 2 siblings being so closely aligned that they are part of one another. But it is also an excuse for this guy to want a particularly strong vengeance. I think they could have made them lovers. They could have made them man and wife, or husband and husband. They didn't. They chose to make them brothers and have it a particularly strong motive for this guy to want to kill Quoden, which is what he says he'll do if he's allowed free. His only purpose now is to kill the man who killed his twin.
Yeah, and again, he says it just before he leaves the security office, and it's so heavy-handed. It's like, Nemesis, villain, the big villain.
This is why I'm here.
Yes, this is my purpose in this episode, and it was just...
And there was also, there's a moment when he says that he had purchased, I think they only refer to the object, I don't think they even name it here, but he says that he and his brother had taken it from an Altoran trader. The word's actually Altarian. And they didn't pause him and reshoot the scene. The subtitles very clearly say Altarian, and that is the way the planet's spelled. But he says Altoran, and they just run with it. I think later in this scene, Quark blurs one of his lines, and they don't reshoot it. It feels as if it was filmed very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
And in most scenes in this episode, the cameras are static. The cameras turn in place from one character to another. And sometimes the actors have to awkwardly walk sideways along the set to go behind one another to where the static camera now is. But lots of DS9 episodes we've seen have tracking shots. Yes. They have shots that'll start high up and go down to the next level.
Intriguing
scenes
angles.
That follow characters along corridors or precede them along corridors. But this episode, it felt as if the vast majority of the cameras were in place and maybe turning occasionally. Yeah. It looked a lot more... I've been a bit unwell over the last few weeks, so I didn't know whether I was just especially grumpy while watching this, but at times it looked like a cheap soap. It was lit about as well as I am here. The characters are really brightly lit at all times. The cameras aren't moving around them. The characters are having to move to get into camera. It felt directed very differently, and I'd wondered whether there was just less attention given to this episode, whether it was rushed, whether they'd had some reason, whether there was a new director. There was something about it that just felt off in the way that it looked compared with previous episodes.
All I can think is that, it must have been, there's no mention in any of the backgrounder on who was directing it, but, we've talked in previous episodes about how well shot DS9 can be, how good cinematography can take advantage of, the expansive sets, and the fact that DS9, as opposed to, say, the Enterprise, is quite darkly lit. It's quite dim comparatively, and it has a lot of darker shades and hues rather than the polished like whites and blues of a Federation starship. So I think a good director, a good cinematographer would play to those strengths, and you're absolutely right. In this case, it's very by the numbers, very formulaic and conventionally lit at a time when that does not benefit the show at all. So
definitely, and in an episode that deals with criminality and potential murder and mystery, lower lighting would have been appropriate for the plot of this episode, not just for DS9 as a whole. So it does just feel as if it feels as if it was an overlooked episode somehow, which makes me surprised that it was the most expensive.
Yep. All I can think is that they were saving all of their effort for the action sequences, the space sequences. Because it does fall short in a lot of other areas, unfortunately. So Arkell is off, on his vengeance. I will be back. Very disappointing. And then it's Quark's turn to try and get out of there unscathed. And I did notice that the office doors to Odo's security office have an excellent drama sensor. So even though Quark gets very close to them, they don't open because they know Odo's got a few more points to say. And it's like, wait, Quark's very close and normally the doors would open there, but they don't because, I don't know, has Odo told them not to? I don't know, but it's a little bit... It's something
it senses his intention to continue hamming it up for a while longer.
Exactly. And I did wonder what your take was as well on Quark's involvement in this story, because he is very visibly involved in illegal activities, even if it is in something of a grey area. And I felt that Quark got away with quite a lot. He was where somebody was shot over stolen merchandise. And it's just, I appreciate he's a main cast member and he can't really be punished too hard, but
where did that pink Fabergé egg go at the end of the scene? Because it was in Quark's possession. He didn't hand it over to anyone, and no one, as you said, no one mentions it again. It was a MacGuffin to get them all into the room. But Quark was there, as you say. A man was murdered in Quark's presence because of an argy-bargy over a pink object, and if anyone had bothered to ask, Quark had paid Cronin to come in there and cause the problem, and given him a Ferengi phaser, which Odo does actually.
Odo does spot that, doesn't he? Yes. And Quark kind of dodges a few of the accusations.
In fact, this was the slightly smudged line. Armin Shimmerman actually says, available in many port. It means in many a port. And again, they didn't reshoot. They just shot it quickly and moved on. But yes, Odo comments that it's curious that Cronin knew the Mirador were trying to sell something of value, and Ron bounces in with, "How dare you suggest that my brother set up this robbery?" And Quark's like, if that theory were to reach the mirror dawn, I'd wake up dead one morning, which is a very tired old joke. But as they leave, Quark calls Rom a loveless idiot, which I like. It reminded me of how much I enjoyed the previous episode, which is very Ferengi heavy.
Ferengi insults, I think, are very, very effective, and even though they're not human, they still resonate, I think, very clearly with us. So I did enjoy that. It was a high point.
I think there are a few points in this episode where things happen because the plot demands it, and I think Quark not being held for further interrogations, them not finding out that Croden had been paid to interrupt at that point, it's part of where they needed the plot to go, which is unusual in Deep Space Nine, because I think usually, whether the inquiry is criminal or technical, the characters consider different angles and talk through differential, even in medical situations, they talk differential diagnoses, they talk about different solutions, different possibilities. And it just doesn't really happen in this episode. Someone will say what is happening and it's just taken as read.
Yes. Can I quickly cut to the backgrounder?
Please do.
And I'm going to quote here from Armin Shimmerman. Recalls Shimmerman, I had a chat with Rick Berman, who was one of the executive producers, and asked him if we went over the line by having Quark participating in a really high crime. I thought that might be a little dangerous for the character and for the show because it means that he can get away with murder, which is not what I think the show is about. It also makes something of a fool of Odo because it happens under his nose, and Sisko's for that matter, and lessens the characters as well.
What did Berman say in response?
That is not recorded, and obviously the episode was shot as is.
It was probably too improper to include in the book. But yeah, Armin could see that it wasn't right.
And this establishes a running theme of Armin Shimmerman really being personally invested in Quark. And even in this early point, the show's barely got off the ground. You don't know what's going to happen, but he's still there going, I know this character. I don't think the character would do that. I think that's an incredibly bold move by the actor. So Armin Shimmerman, fantastic work,
God, yeah, and I'm very inclined to to go on Armin's side with this one. He knows what Quark is about. He's inhabiting him. And Rick Berman doesn't know his ass from his elbow.
As we have established and will continue to unfortunately find. But let us move on. It is into the holding area with Croden, and Sisko is obviously going to say to him, you've committed a crime on a Bajoran station. You will, have to go to trial.
I quite liked the scene opens with Croden complaining, don't you feed your prisoners? And Odo asked whether killing a man hadn't affected his appetite. And Croden replies, it was him or me. If he had killed me, I wouldn't be hungry now.
He does. It's another off-the-cuff dry line, which I did enjoy. I liked that.
Yeah, but again, I think, there's just so much irony in Croden's delivery of everything. I think at this point it still felt okay. By the time there's more serious stuff happening later on,
it's still going on.
Of it. And I was also interested that the actor who played Croden pronounced his planet Rakhar, plays with a slightly non-English vowel sound. So Rakhar rather than Rakar. Everyone else just pronounced it.
I was going to say nobody else does it that way, including the people who live there. So again, there's some slight lack of
oversight and binding it together. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I suspect that this episode gave them a lot of challenges just because of the complicatedness of the plot. So there's probably a lot of effort went into making sure the plot hangs together as shot rather than looking at the other details.
I think you might be right. That is a shame. That is a shame. But we will continue to find that as we go through, I'm sure. Is there...
It's in this scene that Croden mentions that he's met changelings before.
That's it, yes.
He points at Odo and says, now if I had his talents, I would have no problems at all. I've never heard of a changeling with such versatility. And Odo's, what? A changeling like you? You've heard of the shapeshifters in the Gamma Quadrant? And Croden says that he had assumed that Odo came through the wormhole. Odo says that he's lying, and Croden says that he's dissembling, perhaps. But the changelings are harsh judges, and offers that if he's fed, he'll tell Odo about the time when he met someone who was just like him. And we cut to black on Odo looking emotive, I guess. Odo doesn't emote tremendously in terms of makeup, but it can look intense, which I think is what Renee Auberjonois was doing at that point.
I think so, definitely. Um,
Oh, we cut to black, and then there's an identical shot of the station to the one at the start of the episode. They hadn't bothered to vary it.
Again,
Uh,
they've taken many establishing shots of the DS9 model. They can mix it up a bit more. I hadn't realised, but you're absolutely right. It does repeat, doesn't it? Which is a little bit disappointing because there are
yeah,
some good shots later on of ships moving around the station. So for them to drop the ball here and then really do a good one later just seems really strange.
I suspect that this wasn't where their attention was. That those later shots, which are unique to the episode, were given all of the attention and time.
I think you're absolutely right. Am I right then that they cut back and it is the
I've,
senior staff?
that's right. I've got the we're in
Yes.
Cisco's office.
Yes.
O'Brien is concerned that contacting Croden's plant about the matter isn't the best way of introducing themselves to a new species in the Gamma Quadrant. And Dax comments, homicide is a means to open relations. It's not exactly how they teach it at the academy, is it? Which doesn't feel like a Dax line to
No,
me. Why is Dax the one introducing what the Federation Academy does?
absolutely not. Dax is far more than she is a Starfleet officer, but more than that, she's a very experienced Trill. So yeah, she is
Yeah.
not the one who would deliver that line. And Brian, yes, or Bashir if he was there, but he's not. Yeah,
No, it
that's
doesn't.
much more
Yeah,
in
you're
their
right. It doesn't
wheelhouse.
feel. It sounds so petty to pick up on it, but usually in Deep Space Nine, the lines are given to the characters are very specific to them and very much characterized
As they should be.
in what we know of those characters.
We're
Yeah,
still getting to know these characters, so you should really be careful about what they're saying that establishes their personality in these very early episodes. Remember, it's Star Trek, right? It's still TNG, so you've got to expect that there will be viewers tuning in for the first time who've never seen Dax before. So that's going to be the establishing impact for them. So you've really got to nail the characterization.
yeah.
They don't here, which is weird.
It is. It's yeah. I just feel that my attention was on certain aspects of the episode, which I would always look for and which I enjoy, and the
Yes.
people concerned with making the episode were looking in a completely different direction with a very different focus from me. Um, I think Kira in this scene feels like Kira.
Yes.
She says that the Ricarians will probably thank them, as Croden has probably committed all sorts of crimes in their system, and she puts her hands down on the table and says they'll be glad to have the problem taken off their hands. She gets to turn away from camera and walk back again. She's a bit more active, and I think she's given more to act with
Yeah.
than the other characters are.
Hmm.
Um,
Even so, this whole room is very static though, and I know it's
I think it's
difficult.
one shot for
It
most
is.
of all of these characters crammed in.
It is, and as you say, only Kira moves, which
Mm.
is a bit disappointing. And it is hard to do when people are sat talking in a room. You know, perhaps they wouldn't naturally move around too much, but previously they have. So
And I think Deep
again,
Space Nine, the camera will often move
yes,
around and with
yes,
them. It doesn't just turn in place; it'll move around a
hmm
table.
hmm
Yeah, they just don't trouble to do that here.
they do not. They do not. I think,
Oh,
mm,
sorry, at one point, Dax says it won't be hard to find Rakar,
yes,
because Croden was found on a damaged shuttlecraft about 3 light years from the wormhole, and there aren't many M-class planets in the area, which I thought was lampshading that every single person who comes through the wormhole requires an M-class planet, which happens to be the atmosphere that they have on Deep
yes,
Space Nine.
yes. I can give you some backgrounder on that actually.
Ooh.
M-class planets were first introduced in the original series as part of Kirk's original orders. You will confine your landing expeditions to planets of M-class to ensure the safety of your crew. In production speech, that also means you're going to land on planets where you don't have to wear a spacesuit or anything weird, and everywhere will just look a little bit like Earth, just maybe a bit more deserty or a bit more jungly. So it's in universe. It's like, oh, you should only go to like human normal planets. And in production values, that means, you know, we only have to film Earth-type planets, which I think is something that's like Stargate never even bothered worrying about, did they? They were just like, everywhere looks like a forest in the American Northwest. Don't worry about it. It's fine. That's just what they all look like. But yes, it's a very it ties into that common criticism of Star Trek, which is why do all of your aliens have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a bumpy forehead? Because they're all carbon-based bipeds who breathe some kind of oxygenated atmosphere. Again, it keeps production costs down. And in universe, there is that explanation. I don't know if you saw TNG's The Chase.
Alas, I did, yes.
Yes, again, a very maligned episode, which implies that all sentient life in the galaxy was seeded by an ancient race of precursors who were 2 arms, 2 legs, bumpy forehead. And that's why all
So,
of the aliens in Star Trek look so much
oh,
like
very
each other.
different cousins, very distant cousins, ultimately.
Very, very, very. uncool. And it stands like this when I feel it really kind of struggles against something like Babylon 5, which I think did better with alien
Yeah, they made
life.
more of an effort to have the
Yeah.
Pac Marat, have there was an insectoid alien
Hmm.
somewhere, there were the Vorlons. They might
Brilliant.
only have been people with very built-up shoulders wearing huge capes, but at least they didn't look obviously bipedal two-armed humanoids. And am I right in thinking that the term M-class was a Romulan term?
Oh, I don't know
I
actually.
think it was, because I don't think M stands for anything, and it would be odd if it came from Earth for them to give the first designation of planet the class
M.
M.
Yeah,
So
you'd
I
think it'd
think
be
they got
M.
it from the Romulans.
Yeah, it may absolutely be the case. You mean the Romulans or the Vulcans?
No, I do mean the
Oh
Romulans. I'm going to
wow.
look it up now.
Please do. In the meantime, I will just say hello to Avash and Wake, who's popped into the chat for the first time. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us. Um, and going to M-class planets, as they point out, keeps red shirt casualties down. Well, not always with Kirk. What have you
Do you know,
got for us,
I'm
Kat?
wrong. M stands for the Vulcan word Minshara.
Ah,
You're right, it is Vulcan, not Romulan.
I just thought the first alien race that humanity met, who gave them the leg up in science.
I don't know. I was thinking maybe the Romulans were going around destroying M-class planets because they know how much that'll hack off the Federation.
I
But
wouldn't rule
yes,
that out
it is
either.
the Vulcans.
Thank you for the quick research, though, Kat. Much appreciated. Right, because we are trying to
Cisco points out that
roll
while the
through this.
Mirador ship is here, Croden's life is in danger, and Kira says that
Yes,
she'll have Odo increase security.
very
Um,
necessary. Very necessary. Meanwhile, Cisco arranges his own business trip. Him and Dax are going to go off and find Raquel. And again, it's that Star Trek weird trope of surely the commander of the station should stay here and not fly off with one mate to the other side of the galaxy. That seems really dangerous.
yeah, Cisco does seem to be the ambassador for the Federation,
100%
and
he is.
but it's ridiculous that, as you say, he would leave the station to go off and see this planet. We don't know what they do to visiting shuttles. They might shoot them out of the air.
100%.
Um, but
It,
no,
it felt like they were desperately trying to give him something to do. They'd written so much for Odo and Croden and Quark that they didn't know what to do with the rest of the senior cast. So they were like, just take
in
Dax and
fact,
go find them.
yeah, we missed the moment when Bashir came in as the Mirador was lying
Oh,
dying,
God,
just
yes.
so that he could
He could
aim
do,
a tricorder at him
yeah,
and then shake his
do the
head at
doctor.
us. There's just so
The
little for him
doctor
to
head shit.
do.
Oh, it really, really was. Yeah. Not great. So, at least they've got something to do in this episode. I think, O'Brien disappears, we don't see him again. I think Kira gets a few more lines later on in the episode. Uh,
Yes, we're back in Quark's bar. I think
yes.
we see the shuttle going through the wormhole with Cisco and Dax aboard.
Yes, that's right.
And now we're in Quark's bar. And Odo says that various people state that they've seen Quark talking with Croden on several occasions.
Mm.
And Morn even said that Quark bought him a meal. To which Quark replies, Morn should keep his big mouth shut. Threatening Morn.
Trivia point. I didn't realise, but this is the first time Morn is actually named
Oh,
because in the previous episodes he's only talked to or around. He's never actually referred to. So this is the first time we've spoken to Morn. Sorry, we've heard
that's
Morn's name. So
lovely.
there we go.
Oh, nice. Well picked up. Oh,
I
that's
didn't
fun. Yeah,
realise.
because yeah, I think I've noticed Mon only a couple of times. He's
Hmm.
been there when people have been having conversations. Quark
Hmm.
was telling him a joke in the last
That's
episode.
right. He was.
But, oh, it's great that they gave the character a name. They recognise his importance.
Yes, 100%. But I actually liked this. Well, I thought this conversation was good in this episode because
Mm.
it's clear. It's clear that Odo's done some digging, and Quark is trying to evade him, and there was a bit of fencing here, a bit of crashing swords, which I kind of like.
Yeah, there are some nice little phrases fall out of it as well. Quark said that he was talking to Croden just because he was friendly, because he seemed all
Yes.
alone here and he felt sorry for him.
Hmm. Hmm.
Quark said, you should sympathise with my kindness. And Odo replies, there's no profit in kindness. Um,
That could almost be a rule of acquisition.
it probably is.
It probably
Um,
is.
and Quark responds, you attribute odious motives to my every charitable act. And Odo says, that's because your favourite charity is your own pocket.
I did like those lines. They're good when they fence with each other. It's very good.
They are, yes, but I don't know. There's something of those lines could have fit into almost any episode.
It's
They're
true.
nicely phrased, but it is very standard banter between these two.
100% it is.
And Odo has also learned that Quark has made inquiries about finding a small ship to go through the wormhole. Odo assumes that passage back to the Gamma Quadrant for Croden is payment for Croden's part in staging this
Right.
tragic little robbery of yours.
Ah.
Um, Quark asks Odo to keep his voice down because he's anxious about word getting back to the Mirrodon. So unusually, he's not worried about the security officer aboard the ship knowing what's happening and arresting him. He's concerned about getting murdered by the guy whose twin got killed.
I think it's very practical, actually. I think Quark has a good measure of Odo now, and so long as Quark can stay just inside the law, Odo won't touch him. Whereas this Mirrodon bruiser will absolutely throw him out an airlock,
Yeah,
which
that's
he's had
fair.
painfully close experience of already.
Yep. But I think Odo gets a little bit out of character here. Odo starts pressing Quark, asking, "Did Croydon say anything about his homeworld? No. Anything about other species in the Gamma Quadrant? No." Like, why would Croydon have been talking to Quark about changelings in the Gamma Quadrant? There's no reason for Odo to suspect that he would, and I think this is the first time that Odo shows a lot of concern about learning about other changelings. We've definitely had to introduce that Odo is the only one of his kind. We know that he's the only shapeshifter, but I don't think there's been any conversation in which Odo has overtly stated that this is an issue for him.
No, never.
There was the episode of Man Alone where he was being persecuted for being a shapeshifter, but even then I don't think he expressed to anyone, "I just wish there was someone like me to talk to about this."
No, he does not at any point, in fact. So yeah, again, it's like they've almost crowbarred this in as a concept. It's not emerged organically. It's literally been dropped in.
Yeah,
To the
which it
script.
very easily could have. It would have been very easy to throw in the odd, just, Odo failing to have his hand turned back to its normal shape and just going, "I've no idea what to do with this. It's been like this for hours." You could throw in something like that into many an opening scene in Quarks. And they just haven't opted to do it. I think they've assumed that because they've stated that he is the only one, we take it as read that he therefore wants to find out about his past, even though he's fiercely independent and hasn't mentioned it yet. So it feels like it comes out of nowhere here.
It does, and it takes Odo down a strange new path, which they could have built up to more naturally, because you can imagine that coming down the road, but this literally jumps out at you from nowhere, which is a strange way of introducing something that's actually quite integral to the character.
Absolutely, and given how we know this episode plays out, we don't actually learn a thing about Odo under the shapeshifters in this episode. We learn that maybe he has a distant cousin who's been turned into a necklace.
Oh God, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the clumsiest type of bait and switch plot resolution.
Yeah, I've looked up a few reviews of this to see whether I was alone in disliking the episode, and most people actually quite liked it, but they did say that it's a tease. The episode is teasing something about Odo's past, which isn't revealed yet. And I think for me, it felt a bit empty. It felt like they wanted to have an Odo episode, and this was the thing they wanted to gesture towards without actually clarifying anything, without setting anything in stone yet.
I think that's it. It is essentially an extended trailer for the Odo mystery, but they had to spend 45 minutes of my time clumsily getting there. Very disappointing. Thank you, chat, as well, just for spotting that my microphone had dialed down a bit. So we're back in action.
Thank you. I've forgotten what I was going to say there.
We were still basically ranting on this unusual conversation, and I hope you're going to mention Odo's bizarre threat at the end.
What does Odo throw in at the end of this?
Odo says, "The next time you lie, I'll save Arkell the trouble of killing you."
I have a feeling that Odo's threatened to space Quark before. I think for me it didn't stand out because it just feels like yet another instance of Odo threatening Quark in a completely empty way. Whenever he's annoyed with Quark, he'll just say, "Oh,
yeah,
I'll put you in an airlock," and it doesn't matter that much. But maybe it felt like there was more threat here because he was referring to an immediate threat to Quark's life.
And also, for me, it was that Odo seemed actually quite, amped by this mystery. He was really pressing Quark quite hard. What did Croydon say? Did he mention?
He was actually. I think he was physically pushing him back against the bar at the time.
Yeah, they were very close. So it lent a bit more weight to that threat, and I was like, "Whoa, we're meant to think you're the unyielding, paladin, lawful good." And that's not what I would expect a lawful good character to say. It felt like that threat was much more intended than his usual kind of "I'll get you."
Yeah, I didn't pick that up, but I can see that. And I think it's probably there to kind of emphasize how strongly Odo is feeling suddenly about Which again, if they wanted that to be the impression that Odo hadn't realised how much it mattered to him until this came up, he could have said that to someone, not necessarily in this scene, but in another scene in the episode. He might have been sitting alone somewhere pondering, and Quark could come over and ask him, "What's wrong with you?" It's just like, it could have come up. Or with Cisco, someone who is caring and in a position of authority, someone who might understand.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, they could have brought in other members of the cast who didn't have very much to do with this episode.
There we go again. We're finding more holes than fabric in these in the
So in fact,
tapestry of this.
that's what I was going to comment
Yeah.
on earlier. The fact that it's such an Odo themed episode and it's gesturing so much at something that's meant to be important to Odo, and it happens mostly in the presence of non-cast characters who don't, to my knowledge, well, I don't have much knowledge at the moment, but as far as I'm aware, they're not going to turn up again. He's not going to meet Crowden again and reminisce about the time when Crowden introduced him to the possibility of other changelings.
I think that's a safe bet, and that is strange because up until now we've always believed that a Trek crew and the DS9 crew will tackle all these problems together as a group, like Star Trek has always said.
We talk it through as a crew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in this instance, actually, you're right. I'd not even thought of that, but everything that happens to Odo doesn't involve any of the rest of the main cast. They don't even talk about it at the end. It's such a bottle episode. It actually kind of bottles up the impact and doesn't let it go anywhere. So,
and actually, as we go, I'll get to a point where it becomes more salient to say it, but the whole episode could have happened without changelings being mentioned once. There's nothing in the main action of the episode that required Odo to believe that there are changelings out there. He wouldn't have changed his decisions one iota.
No, absolutely not. 100%. God. Right.
I don't like this episode, Tim.
That's becoming clear. Crowden's necklace. Then. And let me, in fact, bring up a quick picture of it. Unfortunately, because this is the technology we have, I only have a still image, but to reassure you, if you didn't watch the episode, that lovely geometric shape does indeed transform in the same gelatinous manner that Odo does.
It starts off as a little flat pendant and it rises up into that little tower formation.
Yes, it does. It does. So, this is the first time we've ever seen anything else that changes like Odo does, and it does therefore make this actually quite significant.
Absolutely. I think we've got a bit of dialogue before that happens where Odo approaches Crowden in his cell, and Crowden is teasing him, frankly, about changelings. Yes. I've always wondered why changelings are so distrustful of other species. Odo responds, "I doubt the changelings on your world would trust you," which is fair. Crowden he's then changed his story and says there are no shapeshifters on Rakar. And Odo points out that it implied there were. Oh, I'm sorry if I misled you. There were shapeshifters on Rakar at one time, but that was centuries ago. They were persecuted, driven out. But I know a place that still has some. The way that he's played as well, the character delivers every line, as I've said, with that. The actor delivers every line rather with that hint of irony to it.
Yes.
I think exactly so that you cannot know whether you can trust him or not, whether he's being diffident because he doesn't care and he's playing it off as something light deliberately to entice Odo, or whether it's just an outright lie. And I think the actor does very well at delivering every single line, such that you never know whether he's telling the truth or not. But the fact that Odo, who can always sniff out a liar, which I think is fair to say of Odo, he's a
100%.
True judge of character and he's very distrustful, but Odo goes along with it, despite having no history of showing any interest.
Because the plot requires it. And
yeah.
It's so uncharacteristic, I would say. Even this early on into Odo's character journey, you would just think, oh, no, he wouldn't. He'd know he's being manipulated. And he even says, doesn't he? He says, could you tell me where this place is? And Cred's like, oh, no, I have to show you. And Odo's scoffs. But you can still see he's got to go along with it or we don't have an episode. And you shouldn't think like that. You should think, well, I don't know how Odo's going to get out of this one, rather than they're going to make him go. They're going to find some reason he's got to do this, aren't they? And it's just, really falls flat.
There is something in the way that Crowden is played. He isn't very enticing. It seems like a shyster. It seems like he's not telling the truth at every given moment. And Odo responds as if he's not telling the truth, but nonetheless goes along with him on it.
Well spotted.
And Odo says that he will kill Crowden if he lies again. Crowden wags his finger and says, that harsh word again. There are times when I don't dissemble. And Odo says, whatever you call it, the truth isn't in you. And at that point, Crowden holds up his necklace, which he says is from the colony of changelings. And he shows that it transforms and goes back to flat again. And actually, at that point, Crowden holds it out to Odo, who turns off the soul's force field briefly so that he can take it from Crowden. And Crowden doesn't make any move to get out or do anything against Odo. He just stands there while Odo gazes at the necklace. Before we switch to the next scene, where the shuttle of Rio Grande is heading towards Rakar with Sisko and Dax aboard. And Sisko hails them, but they don't bother responding until he says that they have Crowden in custody for homicide. And the Exarch of Crowden's region wants Crowden returned to them immediately and is otherwise uninterested in contact from anyone in the Alpha Quadrant. He says that Crowden's an enemy of the Rakari people and we request that he be returned immediately. Crowden has already been found guilty in absentia for a myriad of crimes on this world. And we don't get any diplomacy from Sisko. Normally we'd have a debate. We'd have, well, he's currently under, very polite, he's under Bajoran law. He will therefore be tried under Bajoran law. He would look diffident, he would argue, he would state his case. In this case, he just backs down.
Yeah, he does. It's strange, and I don't know why. He pushes a few times, say, well, you know, this is how we do things. But this guy just expertly boxes him and he says at one point, you know, if your society respects my society's rules, which I don't actually think Sisko said, but perhaps he's heard about the Federation. I don't know. It's a bit of a tenuous jump. And he just boxes Sisko in, saying, well, you'll have to respect our laws. You can't interfere in other human society, in other alien societies. And Sisko just has to go, yeah, I guess. And it's just, wow, the whole thing falls completely flat.
And to Terry Farrell's credit, Dax, after they've hung up, Dax just kind of looks at him incredulous, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, which is a shame, because that's the only thing she has to do in this entire scene, and presumably the whole goddamn journey, which must have taken ages as well, because I think at one point they say it's about like 5 or 6 hours, you know, from DS9 to Rakal, and it's like, my God. See if Dax flew him all the way out there, said nothing, stared at him like, what the hell's happened to my boss?
Watched him being unusually ineffective,
and
then
flew
they go
back.
home again.
Wow, what a great day out for all of us.
And nothing happens aboard the station in Sisko's absence, which would make it dramatically necessary for him to have gone. It could have been anybody.
No, I
could have sent Bashir and it would have had the same freaking effect.
That's what I meant. They literally didn't need to... Nobody needed to go. The people who did go didn't have anything to do. It could have been anyone. Nothing happened on the station. I think...
As long as they just agreed with what the Rakarian Exarch said, then they could have just sent an empty shuttle with a computer on board.
Absolutely. We've got him. Bring him back. Okay. And that's it. It comes back. Amazing, you know. I think they try at one point to have the Miradorm and his crew, Arkel, turn up outside the security office, and there's a lot of threatening and oi, 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 you know, you better hand him over. And Odo says, you know, shove off or I'll lock you up too. And he does. And I'm like, well, you know, when Kira said she was going to increase security around them, I thought there was going to be a proper scuffle. There wasn't. There was nothing. There was no risk to Crowden on the station at all. Just, you know, we've seen straight up riots on the promenade. Again, you know, when Odo was being persecuted for murder, you know. There was a mob, somebody threw a rock, somebody got clobbered, somebody shot the ceiling. It all kicked off.
Arkel knows exactly where Crowden is in security, the only security office. The cell in the security office. And he's not there. He's just sitting in his ship, twiddling his thumbs, waiting for him to be let out.
He does come out, because he comes out with his crew, but he just stands in front of the office. That's when Odo comes over to say, go back to your ship or you will be arrested.
Sorry, you did say, but...
It hasn't stayed in your mind because it's such a non-event. Nothing actually happens. He turns up and then just goes away when he's told. And I'm like, so this guy's the villain. It just does not at all land. Really, really weird. So,
yes. The next scene I think is in Medibay, where Odo has asked Bashir to examine the necklace, and Bashir says it's an amalgam of organic material and some sort of crystal. And Odo asks, do you mean it's alive? And Bashir says, more or less, it's almost like a transitional phase between organic and inorganic matter. I've only seen one life form that even remotely resembles it. And Odo's like, me. He didn't even need to say it. He could just have looked at him meaningfully, but no, script.
Mm-hmm. Heavy,
Oh,
heavy
me.
hitting.
Yeah. Bashir says, in a way, this stone might qualify as a distant cousin of yours. Maybe there's a clue to your origins here.
Oh my God, I
He actually
really
says
hate
those
I
words.
know. I actually audibly sighed, and I'm the only one who watches this. You know, I actually remember going, I mean, like, it's so overt, it's so unprompted. I just hate the line, it could be a cousin of yours. It's a necklace, man, knock it on the head. You know? And
There would have been a number of ways to have
yeah,
announced this thing. You could have
yeah.
said it's peculiar. Do you know, it's actually strange how much the structure of this resembles your own structure, Odo. Had you noticed that? But no, it is just, yes, it's like you. It's related to you.
And it's so out of character. Bashir is obviously he's the doctor. And previously he has been very intelligent and articulate and very very scientific. For him
And
to
he's
say
also very full
something,
of himself. Being the first to make a discovery of something like this,
yes,
he would have been wanting to write a paper about it immediately. He would have wanted to take a sample. He would have been asking, can I keep this?
I want to
But
hear some
no,
techno
Bashir,
babble. You know, I want to hear something about molecular structures and pattern cohesion and
transitional
give
phase
me
between
yes.
organic and inorganic. I can remember
Expand
that.
on that. Expand on it. Tell me something else. Not it might be a cousin. Shut up.
You're right, actually.
Absolutely
There's very
poor.
little technobabble in this episode. Even O'Brien doesn't get any.
Mm-hmm.
Where were the script writers?
I do know that this episode was written by a chap called Sam Rolfe, who created the classic Western series Have Gun Will Travel, which I believe Gene Roddenberry submitted some scripts to in the 60s. So I think Sam Rolfe is good at our plot, which fits into any number of fictional worlds. So we've basically got a Western story that they've stapled to Deep Space Nine and gone, here is a story about a mysterious stranger coming into town. And they're like,
And
okay,
it
what
looks
about the
like
Star Trek?
he's only written 2 Star Trek episodes.
There we go. There we go. So, yeah.
They gave the writers a week off and had this guy just sit in an office and knock out a generic script.
A generic script with some hastily superglued on Star Trek bits, very, very disappointing. But yeah, I hated the sick bay scene. Found it really, really poor. Really
But
poor.
thank you. It's good to know that we have a name to blame this for. It was one writer who was responsible for this episode.
I think, yeah.
And it will have been passed through the writers' room first. They will have tried
I would
to
expect so, yeah.
square it off a bit, but I assume that the writers will be more concerned with the episodes they were in charge of writing, the bits they were proud of. So this one just kind of got under the radar a bit.
Yeah, I think you will find as DS9 goes on, it becomes a more cohesive writers' room as well. There's better script control, a lot more things produced in-house, or the writers who come up are specifically people who want to write for Star Trek, especially for DS9. So the quality overall does go up, as opposed to these jobbing TV writers who are like, here is a standard, as you pointed out, soap script. You can plug it into any conceptual universe, and you've got an episode. No, it doesn't really work like that. To write for Star Trek is something quite different.
And it feels as if they've saved it till this point because the few opening episodes have got to be strong to retain audience interest.
Bingo.
Yeah, by this point the audience are probably hooked and aren't necessarily going to care that much if there's an off week.
That's a very cynical observation that might be completely true.
I just strongly dislike this episode for so many reasons.
It's really poor. It's really poor, Cat. There's no doubt about that. Also, noting the indoor cat pointing out that it could just be a really bad joke on Bashir's part, related to The Rock. Oh, I mean, it's... Yeah,
it could be. Again, it'd feel a little out of character. I think Quark making fun of Odo for being related to a rock.
Yes, 100%. Not Bashir. Not Bashir.
No, he's a bit tactless, but it's not framed that way. I think when Bashir makes a mistake when he's speaking, they point it out. He looks embarrassed. Someone else picks up the slack in the conversation. But yeah, there's nothing signalling that here. I think it's just a bad laugh. But next scene, we're back at Croden's cell again. And Croden asks, how do you like my stone, changeling? And Odo asks him where he got it, and Croden says, what would telling you get me? And Odo says, nothing. Just so bored by these conversations between them. Croden states that he hoped Odo would feel sorry for him as they're each the only one of their kind on this side of the passage. And Odo responds, I feel nothing for you but contempt. You're a thief and a killer and who knows what else. Odo is just signaling constantly that he doesn't trust this
Yeah,
guy. He's got no
100%.
reason to trust him, and yet the motive to pursue his past is supposed to be so strong that he goes against that instinct, and it just doesn't ring true. Odo gives him back the necklace. Croden tells him, in my sector there's a nebula called the Shamra Vortex. There are millions of asteroids in it. I found this stone on one of them. I could take you to it, changeling. And Odo replies, others must know where it is. And says, no, but he's a thief and a killer and who knows what. I hid, which is nice. He picks up
Yeah,
that
he
phrase
does.
again from Odo. He says, I hid there often. I found this colony of changelings by chance, and I know my way back. So we know now that Croden is desperate to get to a particular place in the Chamra Vortex, and he's trying to persuade Odo to take him there. Odo looks at Croden and then back at the necklace which Croden is holding up, and it's clear that Odo is tempted, though it's not clear why, because he knows that the guy's lying.
Yes, 100%.
But yeah, I wrote a little rant here. Will you indulge me? We've got time for me to rant.
Yeah, 100%. We're flying through this. Cutting it to shreds, please. Please crack
Not
on.
enough to talk about. Right, I think it's a practical problem with Croden's character in that he very obviously isn't trustworthy, but that one of the kind of unspoken rules of serialized television is that if a character isn't trustworthy, he's got to appear untrustworthy to the viewer. You can't have someone who appears completely straightforward, vulnerable, honest, and then turns out to have been lying the whole time, unless they can actually rip off a mask and turn out to be someone else. The grammar of television kind of demands that they appear at least a little untrustworthy so the viewer doesn't feel cheated. And there has to be enough evidence that he's untrustworthy for the character to make sense. But this is playing against Odo isn't stupid. Odo is very, very good at telling when someone's lying. So the story
And
here
has
is
done.
effectively... Sorry?
And has done so through this episode. Continuously.
Yes. And the story here is that Odo's need to know about his species overwhelms his knowledge that Croden isn't trustworthy. Odo is unusually willing to believe him, even though we know that the man constantly lies, because his need to know is so great. But I think that as the story progresses, I got more and more dissatisfied with that as a plot. Because we just haven't had that build-up of Odo pondering over time, the question of where he was from, grappling with the problems that he has that only shapeshifters could solve. And I just felt that I could see the writers' cogs turning, that they were desperate. I think we've probably covered all of this rant already, but they were just so desperate to do an Odo episode without giving anything at all away, and the result feels very cold and perfunctory. It feels like a very complex one-off episode that hasn't left any room for warmth or fun, which is normally there in Deep Space Nine, and it doesn't feel in character for the independent, extremely capable and skeptical Odo to go along with this guy when he knows that he's lying, as he keeps saying. I think it's meant to show a new side of Odo, this concern with his past, but it would have been nice if he'd mentioned that to another character, if it had been named on screen rather than just being a silent look of intensity that sprung out of nowhere. But at this point, I think having had this additional conversation with Croden where he's clearly lying all the way through and Odo clearly knows that he's lying, I just got fed up. Like, what are we doing here? Why? What is this plot even?
It's because none of it is springing from the characters or their interplay or their interactions. They are all on rails, rattling towards the conclusion of this episode.
And the stories are usually very character-led. Even the story that was about a guy coming from the Gamma Quadrant to escape his captors, it was O'Brien's warmth and decision to stick with this guy when he was being difficult at every turn that made the story come out the way that it did. There's no like that here. You could replace Odo with a lamp and it would have run the same way.
Which he can do, of course. No problem.
That's an excellent idea for future Odo episodes. Could Odo have turned himself into a lamp for the entirety of the episode and had everything happen the same way?
I think
pretty much.
100%. Absolutely, he could have. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but if he'd have had maybe even one conversation with somebody like Cisco and been like, you know, I don't want to admit to this, Commander, but I have often been fascinated by my origins, my history. I don't know where I come from. And this man offers it, and Cisco could have been like, look, you know, it's clear he knows something, but you've got to balance that against the obvious treacherous nature of the guy. He is a criminal. He has committed murder in front of you.
Yeah, we could have had the very neat thing that DS9 often does of having characters talk to each other. Bashir could have mentioned this to the rest of the ops crew when it comes the time for the security officer to take Croden back to his world. there could have been a very short conversation. Are we sure that Odo should be doing this, given what we know about the necklace?
Right.
But Odo is Sterling. We know that we can trust Odo. Isn't that right, Constable? A nod to it, anything. And it would have bound the characters in more, but they didn't do it.
They didn't. They absolutely dropped it. What they actually did do, I think, in fact, the next scene is Odo and Cisco's office,
Yeah.
hearing that, the Bajorans are willing to release Croden to Rakaran custody, which itself is bizarre because Star Trek itself is built around no, you're under our rules. You've committed a crime on our territory. We will protect you.
Yeah.
Sending you back somewhere knowing you're going to be killed is, well, it's against
We
our rules now.
We had a whole trial episode around Dax because they're in Bajoran space. And because you can therefore have a trial here away from where the trolls live.
But
no, on this occasion...
No, it was just enough for that Rakaran official to browbeat Cisco and go, "You're meant to respect our society's rules." And he goes, "Yeah, all right then." And
it's
so
nice that he mentions that the Bajoran authorities have agreed. At least they remember that they are under Bajoran rule here. But it doesn't feel realistic that they would have agreed. It doesn't feel like something you can pass off so easily.
There was no conversation.
And the plan that they come up with, given what I've said about loving the plans that they come up with in ops, how many sides they look at things from, how very technical their plans are. On this occasion, they decide that the Miradon, what's his name? Arkel poses a threat. Whenever Croden leaves the station, Arkel is going to be scanning all of the ships. He's going to notice that he leaves. So the Miradon is sitting in his ship scanning all of the surrounding ships, all the ships that leave.
That's right.
So how on earth can we get Croden out without him noticing? Let's just have the shuttle leave at the same time as a Rigelian freighter. And hopefully he'll be so busy looking at the freighter, he won't notice. How about we just fucking lock him up? He's threatened to kill Croden.
Yeah.
We know that he's going to try and kill Croden. They could put him in a cell for a day around when the ship leaves, so he doesn't know when it hands, he doesn't know what kind of ship he's left on or on what trajectory, and then he can't possibly find and kill him.
By now, have they not established that the Miradon also brought on board a stolen Fabergé egg? By now they've got to have known. Yeah.
Why have they told him to stay on his ship and not leave? But he's sitting there on his ship, scanning ships, so he can murder
someone. Yes, having brought stolen material onto the station. The man's a criminal.
And there hasn't been a single line about why they can't. They could have said, the Miradons are especially violent. They will. The rest of them will come from wherever their planet is and get it. No, nothing.
Nothing.
They just don't look at it. And I'm not great at picking up where there are plot holes. I'm a bit slow in that respect. And I saw that this was a massive problem. But it's a facet of the script. The plot needs to go where it needs to go. So the character offers one suggestion and they go with it.
Yeah, let's do it.
And it's a stupid suggestion.
Stupid suggestion that didn't need to happen. And it does not show, as you say, any of the ingenuity or creativity we've come to assume with a Starfleet crew who are good at thinking their way out of situations. They shouldn't be in this situation.
The guys in ops, they should all be standing around talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to resolve the problem, and then they should decide to lock the Miradon guy up.
That would have been the easiest option, absolutely, which they should have taken about 3 hours ago. But yeah, there's none of the usual, well, what if, we do some technobabble, what if we bounce a phased polaron beam off the deflectors?
And we surround his ship in a force field.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we just turn off the scanner on his ship? But now we run interference by putting a really big ship in between his ship and the shuttle.
I would also be concerned, do we know that this guy won't just shoot through a freighter to shoot the runabout? We don't know. So we've put an innocent freighter in harm's way because the episode requires it. How
the Rigel system has seen so many problems. We're about to give them
I was going to say, it's a Rigelian freighter. Everything comes from Rigel. All roads lead to Rigel from Quarks. It's so weird. About the only thing I could take away from that whole sequence is I quite liked the visual of the freighter moving under one of DS9's pylons.
Yes.
It actually, and it's like, oh, that's a nice 3D, because normally we're seeing the Enterprise and a planet or stars or another ship.
Yeah, that's very true. So but it actually has to interact with the different dimensions
under
of the
one of the pylons, and then the little runabout nips in beside it. It's quite a nicely filmed shot.
That's where the money went.
And that's where the money went, and all the bloody critical thinking in this bloody episode. Oh God. Anyway, yes. So,
But yeah,
regardless of this being a stupid plan, it works, and the runabout and the freighter both go into the wormhole. They're off to the Gamma Quadrant.
and
Yay,
I
I
think not for the
guess.
first time. It's a. I'm sure they've done this before in Deep Space Nine, actually, but it's a really stupid way of transporting a prisoner. They've got one person from
Yes. Sorry,
DS9.
that's a really good point.
They've got the security officer alone on a shuttle with
Alone.
a dangerous criminal who has
Mm,
committed murder while
mm-hmm,
he was watching him.
mm-hmm.
And the guy's got handcuffs on, but he's not actually fastened to anything. He's
Yeah.
just sitting in a chair a short way from where
We've
Odo is,
seen
in a shuttle alone.
Yeah, we've seen other ships. The chap who took over Bashir's brain, he was in a cell on a ship with a guard and a pilot, and he got
Yes.
away. And they're just gonna
He's
just
not even locked in a separate room. He's just
he's
sitting there
not.
in the
He's just
cockpit with him,
where he could get to
annoying him.
controls. It's just the
It's really
whole.
bad. What happens if he headbutts Odo and Odo falls unconscious and he's still handcuffed and can't
Hmm.
use the controls? Odo
Hmm.
won't be able to use the
Hmm.
controls. What happens then?
Everything, anything.
Contingencies. Oh,
None of that is taken into account because we need to get those two characters back to the Gamma Quadrant.
we do.
We
There's
are
a
getting
brief scene in Ops
railroaded.
where Kira sees that the Miradon ship is scanning the freighter and not the runabout. The runabout
Yeah, there's like
enters
a
the wormhole.
radar effect on the screen, which I thought was cute, but a bit weird. I don't think they have radar in the 24th century. It's all sensors. So, okay, that was weird.
But yeah, back in the runabout, Croden
Yep.
is baiting Odo because, of course, he
Yeah.
is. How do you stand it, changeling, living
There's
where you
a
don't
lot of
belong?
that.
Are you happy? And it's just everything about him screams ulterior motive.
Yes. And there's so much of it as well. They have such long conversation. I think Odo actually says, I've worked out what it is you are wanted for in your home world, talking too much. And I'm like, he bloody
Yeah.
does. He
And I think
bloody
there
does.
probably was a way for Croden to deliver these lines because at the end of this conversation, Croden says, "Oh, I didn't realize I bothered you," and it's spoken ironically, as was
Mm.
everything
Yep,
else he
yep,
said.
yep.
I think had Croden been speaking quite sincerely, he could have been genuinely asking, I've been on my own in this quadrant for only a short time, and I've felt very threatened while I've been here. Do you not feel very alone as the only one of your kind in the quadrant? It could have been sincere.
Yeah.
It could have been delivered sincerely, even though we know he's been telling lies elsewhere, but it isn't. He's just there winding him up constantly and then going, "Oh, I didn't realize this was a problem."
It's such clumsy, heavy characterization that it's all just clearly geared towards making the plot go in one direction. Very,
It is.
very disappointing.
There's a section here where I'm not sure
Mm.
whether the blame lies primarily with the writers, the actor playing Croden, or with the makeup because he
Mm.
can't emote very much because
Mm.
he's got quite heavy brow ridges. But there's a section where, in exactly the same ironic tone, he starts talking about how back on his home planet, they broke into his home and murdered both of his wives, which was a nice nod to a non-standard Western way of life.
Yep, yep.
But the punishment for being an enemy of the people is the death of your family. The only weapon I had was a short slaughter knife that I used for cutting the necks of fowl that we prepared for supper. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the necks of the security officers were no more difficult to cut than the birds. Even the sound they made was similar. It's like, this could have been delivered emotively,
Mm.
and it could still have been uncertain whether he was telling the truth or
Mm-hmm,
not.
mm-hmm.
But I think the actor is committed to this ironic delivery, the
Yeah.
strange tone in which he speaks.
I
And it's
wasn't
just very
sure. I wasn't sure if I was meant to sympathise with Croden or suspect him
And I think
or.
that's deliberate. I think we're not
Yeah,
meant to know what the truth
I
is, but
suppose.
it means that there's no emotion shining
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
It's annoying. It's still annoying
Yes,
that we don't
that's
know
what I
whether
took
what he's
away from
saying
it.
is true or not.
That is exactly what I took away from it. I wasn't sure quite what the episode wanted from me, so what I took away was I'm just annoyed. So when Odo says, I could sedate you for the rest of this trip, I was like, yeah, do it.
You
Just do
do.
it.
Fuck
This
yeah.
guy's just annoying me now. Do it. Which is not what I think what you're meant to think. You're meant to just be constantly like, ooh, is this guy on our side or not? But
And I think that is what they were aiming for, and I think that the actor is probably working against the script, excuse me, to deliver that.
mm,
I think that deliberate ironic tone was his way of
yeah,
not knowing whether what the character was saying was true or not, and leaving us and Odo uncertain. But it just gives the impression that he's lying constantly, and it turns out that most of the time he bloody
he
well
bloody
was.
was. I still don't. See, I've seen the whole episode now, and I still don't know if I'm supposed to even sympathise with the guy. I've seen the whole thing, and I'm like, I just don't care anymore. You just annoy me.
Yeah, I think the decisions Odo makes at the end of the episodes are not the decisions I would have made.
Indeed. But before we get there, we snap back to Deep Space Nine, and Rom is escorted into the bar by Arkell, in true kind of scuttling, scared Ferengi fashion. What does he say?
Rom is the perfect character for that to
He
happen to.
really is, yeah. He's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. It is Arkell who is aware that Croden has left the station somehow. I'm not sure how he knows.
Yeah, and he thinks that the Quark has facilitated this somehow.
That's right. Yes.
Or I think initially he knows that Croden's gone missing from
From
security.
security,
He
that's
believes the
it.
Ferengi are
Sorry.
hiding him somewhere.
That's right.
And he believes that Quark is as responsible for his brother's death. The brother's never named. The brother doesn't have a name. He always just says my brother or my twin.
Oh, wow, yeah. I know it big, but that's only because I've looked at the Memory Alpha article on it,
Ah,
and I think it's Rokel. It's Arkell is the living brother. Rokel
oh, and Rokel.
is the brother who's killed. But
But
yeah, I don't
I
think
don't
they're
think
ever
the name
named.
Raquel appears anywhere in the episode, and probably only because there are with these three major new characters, they don't want to throw too many words at us. We don't need to know what the Fabergé egg is. We don't need to know the name of the murdered man who is now the subject of vengeance by his brother. It's always my brother, my twin.
My twin. Yeah, I don't think it would have been a bad thing to have mentioned his name. I think we could stomach a little bit of world building. Again, the whole thing feels like they're all pop-up characters in a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
Bang, he's dead. Right, now we have a vendetta. Rah.
It's
Really?
just,
Do we?
yeah, it's all just very high concept. This is, as you say, it's very Western-like.
Yes.
This is the guy who's on a mission of vengeance. This is the guy who we don't know whether we can trust.
Exactly.
And none of them feel like real people.
They really don't. But
yes, there's a nice moment here where
like
Quark
this.
tells Rom to bring him the level 4 security clearance chips, which we saw him use in either the first or second episode, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Or possibly the first episode after episode. We know that he's got this little tray with all the security chips, so he can look anywhere on the ship and get on the station and get any information he wants. So he uses those again. So that is quite nice.
Like
Quark then stares at the screen and says that it isn't clear where Croden is. But Arkell boots him out of the way and just says that you can clearly see the coordinates in the log entry, and he threatens that he'll be back to finish this. Quark's lying to him. And I do actually quite like this next conversation between Quark and Rom, because it highlights the difference between the two Ferengi characters. Rom says that Quark is very clever because now Arkell will rid us of Croden and Odo. Because Rom has no idea really what the relationship between Odo and Quark is. He doesn't recognize that Odo is a friend to Quark as much as he's his enemy. But Quark very quietly replies to him, unless Odo is sensible, and gives up his prisoner. And Rom says, oh no, then Croden would tell Arkell the truth of our plan. We're dead, we're dead! But Quark says that he believes Odo won't give up his prisoner. Odo would prefer to get himself killed. So Rom responds very cheerfully, oh, they're out of trouble then. Oh, do you think so? And Quark says, oh, get out of here, you fool. And it's just, without him having to say as much, it's very nicely clear that Quark does not want Odo to die. He's very disturbed by this idea.
Yeah, he is. And once again, Armin Shimmerman gets about 30 seconds, and then it delivers another brilliant performance. Deepens that relationship, and you're just like, oh, wow, they have a really complex relationship. How interesting.
And then Rom is just so much less savvy than Quark. He has no understanding of the subtleties of how that works.
100% he does not. Yes. But yes, that's it. Now the Mirrodon are off after the runabout.
Yes, I think O'Brien gets to alert. It's something to do. O'Brien alerts Cisco to the Mirrodon ship leaving, and
so O'Brien does have something else to do in this episode. One more line. Lucky him.
But then I quite like that Kira, when she communicates with the Dawn ship, she says they're in violation of Bajoran transit regulations, which is just hilarious for its understatedness. It's just, you've got a parking ticket, you must return
exactly.
immediately.
And I think they've used it in other episodes before when Cisco's been like, I need to keep this ship here. Can you come up with some like complex docking procedures or freighter duties or import? So it's nice to actually see that bureaucratic,
It is, and Kira is exactly the person to deliver it. I think that is very well placed. It feels as if the writer understood Kira well.
100%, because you don't really want to argue with Kira. She has it in her tone that second time she messages them. you can hear that sharp crack in her voice, and you're like, oh, I don't know, better do what she says, because Kira's great at telling you what the hell you're going to do. It's great.
But sadly, the Miradon's need for vengeance overrides his fear of Kira, so he just disappears
Yes,
into the wormhole.
off he goes. And again, that I appreciate that there wasn't loads they could do in that scene, but it reflected really badly on them. Like they just sat there and just went, "Oh well, we did all we could," and it was just like, "You guys were
It's Odo's
useless."
problem now. In fact, earlier on,
Mm,
Cisco did say to Odo, while describing the terrible plan involving the Regellian freighter,
yes,
that he wouldn't be able to contact him to warn him if the
yes,
Miradon ship came after him, because
yes,
that would just signal where they were.
yeah.
And I don't know whether that's a standard thing, that if you communicate with one of your shuttles, everyone else knows where the shuttle is immediately.
I don't think that comes up
It's not
again.
a thing.
No, I think that might have been another convenient way to make Odo
Damn it.
terrifyingly on his own with a known killer in a spaceship. Oh god, this
This
thing's
whole
falling
thing is,
apart in our
oh God.
hands. It's falling to pieces. Oh, how disappointing.
But yeah, we're back with bloody Cronin talking at Odo again, trying to persuade him to go through the vortex by hinting that information about his people is there.
Yep.
And yeah, I made a note to myself. I feel that telling Odo the truth about why he actually wants to go into the vortex would have been the shrewder move at this point.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah.
Because he's got every reason to assume that Odo is going to kill him when he
Mm.
finds out that he's been lying to him.
him.
All this, he's alone with
100%.
Odo. Odo is a security officer. He's seen that he's good in combat, but
Mm.
he's still lying to him at this point, assuming that Odo will not murder him.
No,
He's got no reason to think that.
none.
Why is? I mean, it'd be better off telling him the truth. My daughter is down on one of those planets. She's
yeah.
alone. She will die in that stasis pod unless I can get to her.
Mhm.
Her blood will be on your hands. We're going to take a detour. We can then go to a car, whatever. And he can intend to drive off the shuttle on his own afterwards. But it just doesn't make any sense that he's still waiting about the changelings. It just feels so shoved in unnecessarily.
I was wondering if the implication was that Quoden was going to be like a treacherous little shit and like try and bump off Odo once he'd gotten down there and steal the runabout, but it wasn't telegraphed. At the same time, Quoden's been around the station crew, he's been around Odo, he knows that Odo's a very honourable man, so yeah, it would have made more sense to go, right, I'm going to appeal to your honour now as a person. We can rescue someone in danger. And he obviously was intending to turn himself in at the end, so that would have been a perfect trade. Look, help me rescue my daughter, and in exchange, I will stop dicking about, and I will go off and face the music.
But no, it's still teasing Odo and us with the promise of a changeling colony, which he knows isn't there.
Which he knows isn't there. And what does he think's going to happen? Is he somehow going to get the one up on somebody he himself has said has skills that he envies? He knows Odo can turn into anything.
And he's lying to the man constantly. It just doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. Right, because we're making good time taking this apart, and we often, last week we spent 2.5 hours on an episode. If we can get away a bit sooner, that'll be better for our mental health.
There's just a bit I've written here where Croton is talking to Odo about the changeling and saying, they don't maintain a humanoid shape, They refuse to assimilate on my world. They're a proud species. That's why they're so persecuted. And I've written, so many lies! And they're so specific.
Why
is he inventing all of this additional shit about the changelings when it really doesn't matter whether Odo knows about them or not? I mean, Odo just replies, you don't give up, do you? Actually, no, at one point, Croton says, you're one of them, that's for sure. You have the sense of decency, of justice, appealing to his better nature while lying to him.
After having lied to him all of the time. It makes no sense. There is no reason this character would suddenly change tack like that.
Oh, it annoyed me so much. But then the Miradon vessel starts blasting a plasma charge at the shuttle, and Arkel insists that Odo surrender the Rakari prisoner. Yeah, Arkel insists that Odo surrender. Croton to him. Odo refuses. And Arkel says, well, Odo can die with Croton then. Odo tells the computer to make evasive maneuvers, but, and one line I did enjoy from Odo, I'm a security chief, not a combat pilot. It needed to be preceded by, damn it, Jim.
Intentional, very much, according to the backgrounder again, very much intentionally put in, because Star Trek is nothing if not a collection of long-running jokes. So yes, very much intentionally put in.
So at this point, regardless of what's happening around the changelings, Odo, the security officer, the guy who would always have been pinpointed by Cisco to take the guy back to his home planet, isn't able to navigate. This would have
Mhm.
happened whether changelings had been mentioned
Yes,
once in the
you're
episode
absolutely
or
right.
not.
You're absolutely right. Why is there not an actually trained pilot on the ship? Because the plot requires Croden to have a chance to fly it. It's so threadbare.
Really fucking is. He's a security officer. Has he not thought about this? Did Cisco not think about? Oh, I don't respect any of these people this week. Maybe there's been a gas leak on board the station and no one's thinking clearly.
It is the Community season 5 experience, isn't
Season
it?
four,
Season
yeah.
4, sorry, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah,
Yeah, the writing crew have handed over to a new team and it's just not going right for them.
yes, unfortunately. Can
But
I?
yes, Croden says that he can navigate them through the vortex, that the ionized gases will screen them from the sensors. And he says, drop your suspicious nature for a minute, changeling. And this convinces Odo to hand the ship over to him, but it's mostly just that Odo can't drive.
100%. And somebody who's been lying to you for 99% of the time you've known them, saying drop your suspicious nature. No, I'm a cop and you're a criminal. Of course I'm going to suspect you. I saw you
Isn't it a
shoot
kind of,
someone.
it's a feature of the best liars in the best stories that they know when to strategically tell the truth. He
100%.
doesn't tell the truth until it becomes absolutely necessary because his daughter is literally lying there in front of them. He lies to him up until that
Far
point.
too late, you know? Yeah, 100%. To break this up a little and give us a breather, I'm just going to show us a quick picture of the
Oh,
Vortex.
yes.
Chasma Vortex. I'm going to pop that on the screen there. And long-standing Star Trek fans will recognise that nebula as a redress of the Mutara Nebula from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
That's a
Because
delightful spot.
exactly, it's the Star Trek production team love using it. It gets used in several TNG episodes, and it gets used in several DS9 episodes. It may even get used in some Voyager episodes. It turns up being a nebula in about like 50% of all episodes that have nebula. It is a redress of the Mutara Nebula from Wrath of Khan. So love
It is
it.
a particularly nice looking nebula. I can see why
Gorgeous.
they wanted to reuse it. And it is quite nice that it's being a Star Trek property
Yes,
means that they can do, it's not a deliberate callback, it's just saving money. But
it's practical, and as you
it
pointed out,
functions as a callback and it keeps it consistent. It looks the way
consistent.
that a nebula looks in Star Trek because it's exactly the
Exactly,
same
because it's
nebula.
exactly the same nebula. But it is nice to look at that and go, that's what a nebula in Star Trek looks like. We know, we are familiar with it immediately. It's a nice little bit of space-saving plot building. So
I
I
would
like
like
it.
it if eventually a character would go, have we seen this
Have we seen
nebula
this nebula
before?
before?
Nah,
Yeah.
completely new, no one's been here.
To try and make it a bit different, according to the background notes, the matte painting of the Mutara Nebula was, in this case, turned upside down and then flipped 180. So
They
it
fooled us
looks
all.
different. But if you were to stand on your head and then turn around, it would look exactly like the Wrath of Khan. So there you go. But yes, into the nebula, which again itself is a very Star Trek trope that many times the Enterprise is hidden in a nebula from people.
There is at least a bit of technical doodah
Mm,
messing around in this nebula. That Croden knows that there are pockets of Tomer gas there, that if they travel too quickly, if they ignite any kind of fire in the nebula, then it will just explode. And that prompts Odo to say, oh, you have been here before. And
hmm
Croden replies that he does sometimes tell the truth. Odo asks, how do you remember what's true and what isn't?
Oh, give
Probably
me
because this is the only true thing that he said so far.
a... Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
God.
Croden then takes them down to the surface of it. It's an asteroid rather than a planet.
Yep,
Unfortunately, Wikipedia got it a bit wrong. I might go back and edit that.
that's
It
dedication.
takes them down to the surface of an asteroid,
Mm.
allegedly to stop Arkel from tracking their impulse wake and their thrusters.
Mm.
Still telling lies even now. He
Hmm.
then claims that, and then once they've landed, he said, this is where the changeling colony
Oh,
is.
really?
And it was at this point that I realized that nothing is said about any of the changeling colonies in any way changes any of the plot because Odo would have had to cede the shuttle to him anyway.
Yep,
He would have chosen to land there
yep,
anyway.
yep.
All of the lies he's told Odo to make him trust him. The only point maybe is where Odo agrees that yes, he'll undo his handcuffs and let him steer, but they were going to get killed if he didn't.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, again, it was boxed in. It was simply that was exactly the right time, and wasn't it convenient that the Mirador attacked right then when they were just within range of the asteroid? Not any later,
it's
not any sooner. Exactly then. How convenient.
Very. We got a nice little bit of Majella Barrett as the shuttle voice of the
Yes,
shuttle, telling them
I
that there was a
noticed
plasma
that.
blast. Yeah.
Yes, it was lovely to hear from Majel Barrett as the voice of the Starfleet computer, which is continuing a long tradition, which was lovely.
The next scene takes place on the asteroid in a cave tunnel. Croden's still insisting that it's the colony of changelings that are in the cave. Give it up, man.
Yeah. Good set
Uh,
though, I thought. Good.
it does look, yes,
I
it
thought the
does look
caves looked
sufficiently like
quite
an
good.
asteroid. I think it was a bit wind blown. There was a bit of kind of tumbling rock and a bit of
Mm.
sand drifting past. And Odo is fed up at this point, holds him up against the side of the shuttle and insists that Croden tell him whether any of it was true. At which point, why now, I'm not sure. Croden admits it was all lies. There were myths about changelings on Rakaba. Until he saw Odo, he didn't believe that any of it was true. The necklace came from off-world traders and is used as a key.
The whole thing falls apart right there and then because Odo shoved him against a wall. Get out of here.
Is Odo less likely to murder him now than when they're further in the
No.
cave? Possibly. I mean, no. I think he would have kept the lie going until his daughter was there and then have said, I was so desperate to save the life of my daughter.
There's the
That is a
context.
good appeal to
Yes.
conscience.
Yes.
That would work.
Yes.
Suddenly being, oh no, this dangerous man that I was traveling with, who I knew was dangerous because I saw him fight someone off earlier, is angry with me. I'd better tell him that I've been lying to him this whole time.
It's almost a shame I've spent loads of time also winding him up and prodding him and jabbing him.
Completely unnecessarily because he was a security officer and was always going to have to transport me anyway.
Why would you do this?
What? I mean, if there had been a question, if it had been, we're going to send Major Kira through the wormhole with him,
Oh, wow.
and then Odo might have argued, I am the security officer, it's my role to do this. That would have given purpose to the entire conversation that they'd been having. But no, it was Odo's job.
100%. Okay.
Have it. But yes, at this point, Croden tells Odo that in the cave is his only reason for living, which is a truth that he could have told to start, could have stood to tell earlier on. Odo helps Croden remove rocks from the top of the stasis chamber, which contains Croden's daughter, Yareth, which does give Odo a reason for being there, I guess. Croden could just have killed him while they were next to the shuttle, but Odo helps dig the rocks out. Croden then uses the key in the lock. We see the little pallet transform once again to the tower. And they each lift away one of the doors of the pod. And the girl says, Father, I was dreaming about you. So she is his daughter. We know immediately that he was telling the truth about that.
This.
But also, do people in stasis dream? I thought time stood still in stasis. But if she's dreaming, then time must be passing for her mentally.
Depends, I think, on your fictional universe. Because Star Trek doesn't usually dabble too much in stasis. It's very rare that they do that because obviously everything for them moves very fast. Warp travel is wonderful. It travels you as fast as the plot needs you to go. So nobody gets Dave listed, 3 million years into the future. So that is an interesting question. Can I also ask as well? I like that the necklace is the key. Does it have to be? Did it need to be? Why is it? If it's such a rare, weird thing, why is it the key to a stasis cabinet, which is not presumably changeling?
I think just because the stasis cabinet is the MacGuffin of the episode, it is the thing that Croden's plot is leading up towards. So having the key there is a way for him to unnecessarily tie in the changelings.
That was it. That was my impression was as well. You've got this perfectly normal stasis chamber, but you're opening it with a really rare necklace, which you might lose or have confiscated or stolen.
Had they put a little bit more thought into it, they could have had a stasis chamber which itself melts away like a changeling. It could have been made of the same material. Odo could have taken some of that material back. But no, it's just a box. Just a box with lids that lift off using these little handles. No, you're right. It doesn't the key doesn't look as if it fits to the stasis pod, which is just a design flaw.
I think, as you say, it was literally to serve the plot moving forward. Yeah. Okay, fine. We're at this point then. So there we go. So yes, so they've rescued Yareth the girl, and they're going to get out of the caves, and then suddenly the Mirador are back. They're bombing the asteroid. Oh, sorry, I've jumped ahead.
Oh, so no, sorry, you go ahead. You are going to where I was going.
Okay, cool. So yes, suddenly the cave is shaking, rocks fall, the Mirador are bombing it, and Odo takes a rock to the back, and he's out. And this is always the big moral point of a lot of Star Trek episodes. The bad guy's got what he wants, he can get away. But no, he's a thief with a heart of gold and he rescues
But I
Odo.
actually quite did like that moment
Yeah?
because he's standing in the cave, he's walking towards his daughter, Odo is behind him and has fallen. His
Mm.
instinct is actually he goes straight over to Odo and
Mm.
goes to pick him up. And then he hesitates and he looks back to his daughter and he starts for a moment to walk back again.
Yeah.
And then I think his daughter asks a question about whether Odo is okay. And asks his dad, she asks her dad what he's doing, and he goes, "Oh, nothing at all." And he just goes and picks Odo up again. So he doesn't have to say overtly in this very clunky script,
Yeah.
"Do you know what? We don't need to take him with us, Yareth. We could just leave him behind. He poses a danger to us now." No, instead at that moment, I think we see that he is a good person at heart
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it
yeah,
would be easier to leave Odo behind. And for a moment, he considers it because he is also calculating. But he changes his mind, not only, I think, because his daughter is watching him, but I think there is a bit of he gets a moral boost by having his daughter there. He has to be a better person now that she's
yeah,
present again.
yeah, 100%.
It's a trope, but I think it's very strong.
It is, yes, but there are so many greater crimes in this episode, and tropes are not a bad thing, as you say.
No,
So,
and I think this one it plays out quite nicely. There's no overt dialogue to say, "I am deciding to leave him behind. Oh, I've changed my mind." It's just played out on his face, which is covered in this massive makeup. So it's done well. I think of all the shots in the episode, that's probably one of my favourite.
I can absolutely give you that. That is fair. So our crew is back on the runabout, and Odo wakes up with a cracking headache to find that Crowden has flown them away from the asteroid, but everything shakes. They are still under attack.
And they're
And
still
then
in the vortex,
they're still
importantly.
in the
So at any
vortex.
moment, one of our kills proton blasts, because it's now a proton blast rather than a plasma blast. Is that an inconsistency, actually?
There's no consistency at all.
It wasn't protons before. They've just decided. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
are they not photons?
It might
Photon
be
torpedo?
photons. That might be my fault. But previously, it was plasma, I think.
Yeah, it definitely was a plasma charge to begin with. So yeah, they are not keeping it.
He's got two weapons on the ship, and now he's using a different
Sure,
one for
why
no
not?
obvious reason. But yes, one of his proton blasts might at any or photon blast might ignite a tomag gas cloud and
Hmm.
kill them all, so they're still in danger. And at this point, Odo co-pilots the shuttle with Crowden. They're working together for the first time properly.
Mm.
And he asks Crowden to direct them to the closest Khmer field. Crowden tells him that his sensors might not detect how volatile the field is. If he follows us and then fires on us, the whole thing will ignite. Odo says, "That's what I'm counting on." This is
Yes.
the moment when the knowledgeable character, who incidentally is a terrible stunt pilot
Yes, that's a
and
good
could get
point.
away from the firing of the ship before,
Mm.
but now he's about to do something incredibly dangerous which will work because plot.
Bingo. I also bumped on that. I thought this whole thing is it's very Star Trek tropey, lure you into somewhere where you will blow yourself up with your own weapons, very Star Trek solution. But also, this does not tie in with what the episode has just established that Odo's not a pilot. How would he know
Yeah,
this?
Crowden is the stronger pilot, and having already evaded the authorities several times, is more likely to have, and he's familiar with the gas clouds, he is more
Yeah,
likely to have thought of this than Odo.
100%. That's a very good point. He should have thought of this first. But
But now
no.
I think it's a matter of Crowden has saved Odo's life, so Odo
Yes,
has to be
that's
the one to
exactly
save
it.
the three of them.
It's the
So
plot.
they both owe each other.
What I am going to do is I'm going to quickly pop on the screen a nice picture of the gas cloud because I did like it, and again, it was very reminiscent of the Wrath of Khan with the Reliant and the Enterprise moving through this weirdly lit, shadowy realm.
It's a very beautiful shot. I
I
really
liked it.
appreciated that, the way that the gas is shown. It just
Mm.
looks there's something very goth about it, I think. There's something of dry
Yes.
ice
Dry ice
with
and
white
pulsing
spots on it.
purple light, yes, and
Yes.
dark outlines in the mist. Yes, a goth night amongst the stars, I think you will say. And apologies
Yes,
to
and
our
it's nice.
viewers that
And the shot nicely
very
illustrates what's
grainy.
happening. That you've got
Mm.
the shuttle on which Odo, Crowden, and Yareth are sitting, and that is perfectly stationary against the light. And
Yes.
then you've got the Myrdawn ship creeping up on them. There's genuine
Yes.
tension in that shot. It's very
Yes.
nicely done.
Yes, it's a real standout moment for me. I loved how it was shot, the implicit tension. It is the best bits of Star Trek, which is, that cat and mouse game between spaceships rather than just blazing away Star Wars style.
Yes.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that moment very much. And of course, they're building towards that inevitable lure. Oh wait, does Arkyle message them one last time to say, right, are you ready to give up? I think he does, doesn't he?
I haven't made a note that he does. I think at that point they're just anticipating that he's going to fire at any moment.
Yes, yeah, I haven't made a note either, but I had it in my mind. Never mind. So yes, they move towards that inevitable Star Trek trope of tantalizing the enemy. The enemy takes a shot.
And
Kablamo.
I think
Mm,
Croden says that he's firing up his photon blasters or whatever the heck it is that he has this time around.
doesn't matter. Does not matter.
And Odo tells the engine to engage at just that moment. So the shuttle
Mm.
comes firing out of the gas cloud just as the Meridon ship goes up in
Right.
flames in the gas field. So that's the other Meridon twin is now dead. So
And all
that's
of his crew
resolved.
as well.
Right?
And all of his crew as well.
Oh,
So quite a body count for this episode.
Odo murdered all of them rather than
Really
having
did.
justice done by returning the killer, who
Really
was going
did.
to be killed on his own world anyway. What even is ethics?
Plot, plot, plot above all else. Forget ethics, forget morals, plot.
Yeah, we have had it come up previously that Odo was very happy. Well, happy is a relative term, but he was willing to follow Cardassian rule
Yes,
on
that's true.
Terok Nor when it
That's
was
true.
still a Cardassian station. When it became the Federation Deep Space Nine, he moved to having to follow Federation and Bajoran rules.
That's right.
So we don't really know whose rules he's meant to be following here. He's just he doesn't give a shit about the Miradons because they're threatening to kill him, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, to be honest. Yeah, I will give him that as the
But yeah, the
justification.
question remains now of whether he returns Croden to Rakkar or whether he
Yes.
lets him go away and live his own life. After they left the gas cloud, Odo leaves Croden in control of the vessel and says, "Take us out of your precious vortex." So there's an unspoken trust there. There's I trust you to take us safely out now.
We've saved each other. We're on an even keel now, I
Yeah,
guess.
they're buddies now. Croden then makes one last request of Odo. He says that Gareth will be all alone in your world, as you have always been. She's going to need someone to look after her.
Mhm.
And at this point, actually, I think he drops the ironic term. The actor can now just speak
Yes.
with sincerity for the very
Sincerity,
first
yes.
time in the episode, which is a blessed relief.
I got that as well.
Oh. And he continues, "You know you could use some company, changeling. You deny it, but we both know it's true, or the stone would have meant nothing to you." Which, fair enough, he does now having... Still looking skeptical, Tim. He knows something about Odo. He knows that Odo, liked the necklace.
And he clearly is. He clearly is curious. And, you can see it because that is what the episode's been setting up. That Odo's curious about his origins, his race, his people. It's been done very, very heavily handed for a Star Trek or a DS9 episode. But yeah, that is a true observation. I can't argue with that.
But yes, I think I noticed at this point that it could have been an interesting plot going forward if Odo had adopted the child and then grouchy Odo had to learn how to parent along with his duty as a security officer. I think that could have been an interesting new change of pace for Odo.
100%.
But we're not going in that direction, sadly.
So, no. So, they're still establishing the characters rather than sending them in strange new parent trap directions. So instead, we are rescued. Deus Ex Machina. Who should be around?
Before Odo has to make a bloody decision.
Exactly. It's all taken away from him. No problem. Plot resolution via the Vulcans, who were just there. Hello, we're some Vulcans. We happen to be passing by in this quadrant of space.
The specific part of
right
the
here.
wormhole that has this vortex in, which no one has shown interest in before.
Nope, never been mentioned before, but no, we're here and we will happily resolve this situation for you so that you don't have to deal with a complex situation. Give me a break, guys. I appreciate that they just don't set that up. Just don't set that up. Give us some more sensible way of letting Croden and his daughter go away.
I mean, Odo could have brought them back through to the Alpha Quadrant and found somewhere else for them to live. They could have been living alone as the only members of their species in the Alpha Quadrant, just as he does, and that would have been a nice parallel. And they could have promised to drop by someday in disguise maybe, because everyone else on board knows that he's a murderer because he murdered someone in front of everybody.
That's a really good point. But the whole thing is completely resolved by these Vulcans who just appear out of nowhere and are like, here is a way out of this plot that you've written yourself into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Odo's law-abiding nature is not really pushed here because he's given
No.
an instant out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could have said, he could just have told the Vulcans, no, actually, we're perfectly fine. I'm on my way to Rockar to drop off this prisoner.
Yeah.
But then he would have been saddled with a young girl to look after, which would have been a problem for Odo. It doesn't necessarily feel like the most honourable resolution even. It's just the one that leaves him with the fewest difficulties.
Exactly. It is such a lazy way out of a situation they didn't need to write themselves into. Why is any of this happening?
This episode?
I don't know, mate. I do not know. You know, I've seen it several times now, and I still don't know what the hell any of it was meant to do. Other than, you know, clumsily try and start Odo on this path to, I am a mysterious alien, I need to find out about myself. But it's done so goddamn badly.
It was set right at the beginning when we were introducing Odo. We know that he's a mysterious alien.
None of this needed to happen.
No, this was entirely avoidable.
All of it could have been avoided. It didn't need to be Odo at all, you know.
Cut this episode out and none of it will ever be mentioned again. Mind you, he has the necklace now, though, so surely that's got to come back.
So shall we press on with the episode? Because no spoilers, you know.
Oh, sorry. So yes, other than the one where Odo finds a necklace, the Vulcans, it's a science vessel. They believe that Odo very just quickly and effortlessly lies to them and surprises Croden by doing so, says that he's beamed over 2 survivors from a ship that wasn't so lucky and that he has to complete a mission, and would it be okay for the Vulcan transport to take them back to Vulcan? So Odo does now believe, despite the huge number of lies that Croden has told, that Croden isn't a dangerous criminal, that it's fine to send him to live among unsuspecting Vulcans. And the only explanation I can think of for this is that, he has a daughter now, and if he loves his daughter,
he can't be a bad guy.
Even though he's definitely a murderer, and he's also committed unnamed crimes back on his home planet, which we've waved away with politics, and that they killed his family.
That was the other really tenuous clarification was, I think we were meant to actually believe that his homeworld was some kind of like nasty police state.
Which I think was probably meant to be hinted at by the Rokaran official just wanting him back to execute him. But there was that wasn't ever looked into.
No.
We don't return people for summary execution.
No, absolutely we don't. You know, mind you, I'm also remembering the criminal taking over Bashir's brain episode when, you know, a criminal was judicially executed, non-judicially executed.
And we both have big problems with that. No one else apparently did.
Nobody does. So, in general, it seems like Federation law very thin on the ground around the wormhole, you know. Listen, look, nobody else saw it, so just don't worry about it.
But yeah, as long as no one tempts Croden with anything he needs, then he probably won't murder anybody again, because we definitely saw him murder a man earlier.
Yeah, he straight up did kill someone. And that was only just for...
And I don't think he had to.
No, it was just so he could get a lift back to the Gamma Quadrant. That was it. You know, maybe he could have just waited around for couldn't he have caught a lift on that Rigelian freighter that was sailing out? Why didn't he just go with them?
Situation, he was only there to threaten them and take the object. He wasn't meant to kill anyone.
No.
Was the Miradon actually going to murder him in that moment? Because I didn't get the feeling that he was.
I didn't either.
It wasn't self-defense. He just killed him.
He just straight up blew him away. Yeah. It was a tremendous mistake.
Straight up blew him away.
It was a tremendous error. None of it should have happened. None of it should have happened.
The Vulcans don't know who he is or what he's done, so it's fine. Like, going to murder a bunch of Vulcans, that's not a problem. But no, he's a father, so he can't.
He can't.
We know that about him now, even though he was a father when he murdered that guy in front of a bunch of people.
He's possibly fleeing a really nasty world, we think, based on one conversation that lasted a minute and a half.
I think that is probably meant to be the plot that we're meant to believe of him. He was a desperate man, Quark got him a way out, and something went wrong and he accidentally shot someone, but he never expresses any remorse for killing someone.
There is none. You're actually just meant to think, oh, wow, yeah, he's a bad guy for wanting to avenge his brother. Wait. That's not a bad thing.
Not only his brother, but his soul twin. They were joined in a way that we can't even understand.
Yes, but you know, Croden's government killing his his wives, which is like an equal crime. You know, there's another murder that should be
That's a really
avenged.
good point, actually. He did to that Miradon what his government had done to him.
Why are these not equated as equally bad? Why is one okay?
I think just because we're just not meant to look at it. We're
We're
just meant to
not.
follow the plot in the direction it goes and just
We're
be like, oh, that's
breaking
nice then.
it. We're
Oh, Odo's got a
breaking it.
cousin in a necklace.
Oh God, I hate that line so much. I hate that line so much. Right,
But yes,
Cat.
but yes, this is an unusually bad episode.
Yeah, it
And I
is.
think I would probably be less angry about it had it not been preceded by 11 strong
Yeah,
episodes.
I'm so glad you do think so, and I do think DS9 is really rare for having like a really strong start. So I am glad that you've had that good experience. I'm surprised we've made it this far. I do think at some point we were going to fall into the trap of having a poor season one episode, or even just a poor episode, you know. So it's an interesting palette change, I would say.
It's not one I needed. I think especially given that I was unwell last week and it
Okay.
stretched it out by another week. So we've both got another week having to think about this horrendous
Yeah,
episode.
that is very true.
Um,
What a
I'll try and save the times
pity.
when I'm unwell when we've got good episodes and we can just save them for longer.
I don't know how you're going to do that, but okay. I wish you the
Nor
best
have
of
I,
luck.
but frankly, the power of this episode compels me. I don't want to go through this again, Tim.
We will do what we can to cut through it as quickly as possible.
But yes,
Um,
just the wrapping up the
yes,
plot of the episode,
yes,
Croden and
please.
Yareth beam up to the Vulcan vessel, holding hands because they've got no fear at all that their molecules are going to get mashed
I'm
together.
so glad you spotted that. That has been an often discussed problem in Star Trek. Technically, according to the technology, you're inside the
There's a
annular
beam, isn't there? There's
confinement
a
beam.
circle that you're meant to stand on
You're
that goes from
standing
ceiling
it,
to floor,
and it goes
and
down.
that's what gets transported. But no, I mean, in Next Generation, you've got a whole
Yes.
bunch of comedy Irish people surrounded by goats and hay that
Oh
all get
God.
beamed in.
Oh, please don't
It's a
mention
horrible,
that
it's a horrible, horrible
episode.
episode.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, these people can just stand right next to each other, holding hands, and know that they won't come out as one three-limbed
Horrendous.
beast at the end of it.
Yes. Think of the motion picture with the transporter that goes wrong and what came back didn't live long.
Oh my God, that was so
Isn't
dark.
that is one of the
Bloody hell.
worst things I think I've ever seen in Star Trek
I want to see a
is
Cronenberg redux of that film now.
yeah. Apparently it was a
Ah,
lot worse in production. We're completely segueing now, but yeah, they had it a lot more clear what was in the
oh my
transporter beam.
God.
Sonak and the other officer was them getting quite visibly mangled. So,
Oh my God, that's
so,
amazing.
but that's the point. Transporters are meant to be these kind of like quite scary technology, and people just hold
And they
hands.
have technology, there are rules about how they
Yeah,
work.
yeah. But plot. Isn't it nice?
But
The
they have
whole
to hold hands
hands,
because they're reunited now.
having the hands
So,
chopped off.
God, but even worse than that, Odo tells the computer to take him home and then comments, home.
Home.
Where is it?
How is it?
And then he looks at his necklace and says, someday
Someday
we'll know.
know.
Cousin, engage.
Oh,
End of
oh,
episode.
oh, oh. Cringe. Also, can I just say, if he's just sent the Vulcans back to the Alpha Quadrant and he said, I've got a mission to complete, is he not now
Following them.
following them or going
It's that
alongside them?
awkward thing where you said hello to someone in the
Yeah,
street and
that's
you're
exactly what
walking
it
in the
is.
same direction. Oh, I better get going now then. Brum, brum, brum.
Oh God.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. He's got to hang around for a little bit.
Yeah, he's got to wait for them.
Leave.
Why did nobody think of this? We're just a couple of fans. You know, we're not trained TV
I don't even know
writers.
Deep Space Nine. I'm watching this nonsense for the first
And
time.
you are expertly
Oh.
pulling this thing to shreds.
Mm.
Ah.
Tearing it apart like a jackfruit in a vegan burger.
Excellent. Right. There we go. We've completed
Yeah,
our
we've
scene
dealt
by
with the episode.
scene.
The episode is behind us. We never have to watch this episode again in our lifetimes
I'm
now if we choose not to.
sorry you had a bad experience, but secretly I am also happy you did because I was really keen to see how you would react to a bad episode, and it
I
is
like
all
to
I
think
could
that
have
it
hoped
shows that
for.
I'm not just undiscerning. I sometimes hate things unwarrantedly as well as just loving them for no good reason.
I think that's perfectly human. So no problem there. But I think, have amassed a litany of errors this episode has made. a litany of errors.
Oh, see, it's just all of the things that I really love about Deep Space Nine, I think, are missing. All of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
warm characterization, the way that plot is
yes.
very neatly carried from one character to another, so that
Mm-hmm,
everyone is involved.
mm-hmm.
Not having the same shot of Deep Space Nine twice in a row because they just didn't notice. Just all the things that make it so wonderful were kind of absent here. They
Yeah,
still had some of the good background stuff. There was still lots of people populating the station in the background.
yeah.
It was business as usual
Felt
in
like a
that
real place.
respect.
Yeah.
But the staticness of the cameras throughout. There were a couple of very nice shots in the Vortex and when they're actually on the asteroid.
But they stood
But
out more for being so different to everything that came before and after.
absolutely. And I suspect that when I watch the next episode, I'll be remarking on how the shadows work and how much better. There was a scene in this when Quark was looking at the screen while using
Mm,
the security clearance chip.
mm.
The camera is leveled upwards and you can see the white ceiling of the bar. And I think it's the first time we've seen that for us. We've probably glanced at it before, but it's
Oh,
the first
wow.
time that the shot is leveled at it for that
Oh,
long.
I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know that the ceiling is built in so that it can be shown, but it kind of spoils the effect of this dingy bar that
Mm-hmm,
Quark's normally is. It's usually atmospheric.
mm-hmm.
And this was just, it was like being in a schoolroom in the 1990s. It was just
Just a
really brightly lit
fluorescent
from above.
panel, yeah, shining down at you. God,
Yeah.
I'd never
And all you
thought of
need to
that.
do was shoot it over Quark's shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was very strange. And it's not that they didn't want to change camera angles. There was a lot of changing of angles of camera, but they were almost all static shots. Or the one very unfortunate shot in Ops where it was focused on O'Brien, then sweeps around Kira in the foreground, and then Cisco has to walk to be behind Kira so as to be in shot.
God, I hadn't
It
even spotted
just
that. You're absolutely right.
it just so much about the script itself and the way that it was shot felt really clumsy. And I just, for something that was meant to be delving into an integral part of one of the characters, it feels like an episode that was pawned off on a B crew.
Yeah.
It feels as if the main players who made everything wonderful about the first few episodes were taking the week off and they'd given this to whatever the camera equivalent of an understudy is.
I think
But yeah,
you might be quite right with that. I just, it felt like so many things were dropped in this episode though that I don't know, where the mistakes were crucially made. Was it the directors, the producers, or
I,
just
I
everybody?
I think, thinking generously, I imagine that they were just on a very, very tight schedule.
Yes,
They had a couple of special shots to do, and otherwise, it's just a lot of dialogue to be delivered.
there was a lot in this episode, wasn't there? A hell of a
There was
lot.
just too much going on, and none of it was very
I was going to
interesting.
say a lot of dialogue for what was essentially a really uncomplicated plot that falls apart very
I
quickly
think
after you
it
prod
was
it.
a little complex just because you've got Croden having been paid by Quark to
Oh yeah,
interrupt the thing that's going on. It goes
but
wrong
that
when one of them
didn't
gets killed, and
make
then
any
that guy's a menace for
sense.
the rest of it. But that was plot necessary because that guy's got to get back to the game. There's a lot to explain in order to understand what's happening at each stage of this episode, but none of it was interesting enough to be worth having happened.
It really wasn't, was it?
Odo could just have found the necklace somewhere and found that it changed shape, and that would have captured everything that happened in this episode.
A lot of
Because we
people
still don't know
died
where it came
unnecessarily.
from. Yes, people died so that Odo could find out nothing about
Find
his
out
past.
nothing at all. Oh my god. What a
I'm just gonna, yeah, this one is
chilling
forever just going to
price.
be the one where Odo finds a necklace because nothing else needed to happen.
So, on balance, I think we have to come away and say we were disappointed.
It wasn't my favourite so far.
No,
Yeah.
no. I think that is a fair call, and it is a shame because I do think Odo has one of the most compelling backstories. You know, like we've had Worf is a Klingon trying to fit into Starfleet. Okay, Data is an android trying to fit into Starfleet. Okay, Spock was a Vulcan trying to fit into Starfleet. Okay, not that I'm like saying there's a theme there, but Star Trek likes to do that. It likes to present you with a conventional area and then introduce somebody new. And with Odo, we know nothing except that he's a shapeshifter, which is not something that's really been encountered a great deal in Star Trek to
Yeah, and
this
I'll
day.
be interesting to see how that's played out because I think that it's probably most similar to Data's story because with Spock and with Worf, there is a culture to which they refer.
Yes.
Worf is unusual in having been brought up by humans and therefore being closer to the Federation than to his home world.
Hmm.
And I think that being a child of two cultures and the
Yes.
difficulties he encounters there. It's
Yes.
beautifully explored, and I
Yeah.
assume that some of the writer's own experiences came into
I
that.
would say 100%.
It's very warmly explored, and I really love the delicacy with which it's done sometimes.
Hmm.
Whereas for Data, he is the only one
Yes,
of
that's
his
true.
people.
That is true.
And he knows who created him, and he ends up with a fucking enormous family who just keep getting retconned in. So sick of it by the end. But with Odo, it is somewhat different because he hasn't been brought up within the Federation. Data has a massive Federation background. Even though he was found on the planet, he was immediately brought in, and he went through all of the exams and learned everything that a Federation officer knows.
Same as
his culture is Starfleet.
His culture is Starfleet. Spock is half human, half Vulcan, does belong to two cultures, went through Starfleet, has that experience, has a massive fucking family, members of which are constantly retconned in. I'm not saying that Star Trek writes to a certain time, but you see certain similarities crop up. I can tell you, Odo's story is not the same.
It doesn't feel the same so far. There isn't any. There are no ties for Odo. There's no home planet to refer back to. There's no culture for him to either emulate or be naturally part of. It is very different, and I feel that at this point they haven't planned the long game for Odo. I could be wrong, but it feels as if they created a very.
Take it on this episode, in which we've learned nothing about Odo, and the whole thing was a goddamn write-off and a bust. So I would say, let's read into that and say that assume the creators have not gotten any further. The Indoor Cat is reminding me not to give you any spoilers, and they are right. I will not. Suffice to say that yes, Odo's arc is something else entirely, which I really want them to bloody well get to and not waste our time with this. But we're getting irate again.
As the Indoor Cat points out, it is unfortunate that this one followed the Nagus, because the Nagus was such a strong episode. And it just typified in so many ways what a good episode of Star Trek can be. And this episode was just devoid of all of that.
It really was. The Nagus spent time building up good characters, a depth of understanding of an alien culture. It had comedy, drama, intrigue, good character interactions. It was,
and the only additional cost were paying Sean, whatever his name is, to be in there and making the staff that he holds and his extra crinkly fried ears. It was probably much cheaper to produce, and it was so much better.
So much better. So, I would like to let you go because it is 2 hours, and I think you absolutely have earned the right to get away from this earlier. So
I need to go and look at something that I like for a while.
There we go. Wash that palate, Cat. But any closing comments or anything like that?
I am not glad to have seen this episode, and I hope I never experience another episode like it.
Okay.
I don't think it's as bad as the worst episode. To be fair, I don't think it's as bad as the worst episodes of The Next Generation. There was nothing in it that culturally offended me. There were no race politics that anyone stomped on. There was nothing about gender that was explored. They looked at two different aspects of cultures, the twinning of the Miradons and the having two wives, the one Rakarian character we meet, but none of that can be explored because the plot just didn't give it any space. So it didn't offend me for my sensibilities at all. It could have been worse in that. It could have been racist.
I can't believe we're saying that.
The episode.
That is a terrible thing.
It could have been worse. It could have been racist. Oh my god!
But you're right. There are some TNG and original series episodes that just are from another time entirely and just do not stack up with modern values at all. I honestly can't guarantee that we won't hit something like this again, or I honestly can't, because it has been a long time. It is a rewatch for me, but it has been a long time since I've seen some of these episodes. I'd forgotten Vortex. I'd repressed Vortex, so a lot of it came to me new, so I can't guarantee, but we will.
I'm not going to hold you personally responsible if there are other episodes that are bad, Tim. I know that you didn't retroactively create this series to torture me.
But if I had, it would have been
we are all in purgatory,
and
this is my
Well, no, because there are actually some good episodes coming up, which I don't think you would get in purgatory, and we must get to them.
The Indoor Cat suggests that we all go and look at cats now. That sounds like a very good plan.
Excellent plan. So, I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks, Kat. If we haven't put you off completely with this episode, let's look to wash our palate with a better episode,
I'm
hopefully soon.
optimistic.
Fingers crossed. So I will thank chat for tuning in, and I will thank Kat for their feedback on this very interesting episode.
No, and thanks to the indoor cat for moderating and
Thank you.
reminding us not to drop spoilers.
Oh God, it's so hard, but thank you.
I appreciate it every week
Yeah.
that goes by that I don't get spoiled for Deep Space Nine. I really do appreciate it because it must be very difficult to discuss it with so much knowledge of all of the episodes that come after it without mentioning them. So no, thank you for that.
Yes, it is. It is. But it's the best way to enjoy it is for you to experience it new, which is the absolute goal. So, thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I would just ask people to follow us here, and I will pop this episode on YouTube as soon as possible, and we will see everyone hopefully in a couple of weeks. So take care, live long, and prosper. Goodbye.
Bye.